Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Knights of Last Call. I am Derek Melinda, and I am excited to have you back here today to discuss, well, all sorts of things. Origins 2024 in particular. Of course, we've been off for the past 2 weeks, so we appreciate you taking a little bit of a summer break with us. Hopefully you didn't miss us too much. Although if you did, maybe now you understand just how important the Knights of Last Call are to your everyday lives. Anyways, case, welcome everybody. Excited to have you here. Again, this is going to be kind of a, getting back into the swing of things. I haven't streamed for 2 weeks. That's a long break. I think that's the longest break I've taken since I started this channel. And so today we're kind of just going to be a little bit chiller. We're going to be kind of doing some of just stories and insights and conversations that I had while at Origins 2024, and answer any questions that you all have here in the chat. So, yeah, I think it will have a pretty relaxed and chill stream today. I was trying to play my sound of Are You Ready to RPG, but apparently my Stream Deck got updated or something, and it wasn't working while I was away. So let's see if it's running now. Let's see here. Okay, there.
Ready to RPG.
RPG. It's not the same without it, right?
RPG.
We need it.
RPG.
Okay, there we go. Now, now I felt weird. I felt strange. I felt naked and afraid, but now I feel clothed in the chanting. Yeah, we just completely needed it. Exactly. So, yeah, so before we go ahead and get started, though, just a real quick little announcement. One of the Knights of Last Call, one of our oldest patrons, Damien, who is also a moderator for our channel, has been one of our moderators since the very beginning, had some unexpected trip to the emergency room. And of course, in this day and age, an unexpected medical cost can oftentimes spell financial ruin for so many people, even people with insurance, due to high deductible plans and the like. And of course, for so many people, just being able to casually throw down those kind of deductibles can be basically financially ruinous. So Damien has started a GoFundMe, GoFundMe, and I threw a link to that in the doobly-doo, the description below. If you got a couple of bucks and you want to throw a couple bucks Damien's way, that'd be cool with me. So thank you to anyone who wants to go ahead and do that. And, we're wishing Damien all the best on his recovery. So let's go ahead and see who we got here today. We've got Chris is in the house, and he says, I've had nothing to watch for weeks. Well, we're back. What is up, Jackal Torn Moons? Dr. Waits, listening while we cook dinner. Dr. Waits, it was lovely to meet you and your wife and your wife's brother at Origins. I have a couple of stories about Dr. Waits, so looking forward to that. Nakia, totally welcome to the adventure. Well, welcome aboard. Thank you so much for that support. Enjoy the loyalty badge and the cool emojis. I'm really, really awesome to welcome you to the Knights of Last Call. New to the Patreon and the channel, excited to catch a stream. Wow, well, that is a very, very, very awesome thing. I look forward to hanging out with you, talking games with you. Hopefully you find your time with us to be very, very productive and fun. That's what we're here to do. Isaiah enjoying the return of the chill beats, listening to Knights of Last Curl. Gonzo is here. We've got K. Steinwand is here as well. Yeah, talk all things 5e. Actually, we'll get into that. But yeah, we were having some 5e conversations originally. I guess we could kind of go off with this. So last week, I actually hung out a bunch with Stephen Glicker from Roll for Combat. And he came into Cleveland on Tuesday, and we ended up going to a ball game, Guardians game, with me, him, and Smith. And when we got there, he was like, "Oh, I just had the whole day off, and all I did is watch press releases and all the D&D stuff being released." And I was like, "Oh, what D&D stuff is being released?" I literally have no idea. So Stephen was telling me all about what had gotten talked about on the D&D release, and then the next day, Wednesday, when we drove down from Cleveland to Columbus, he was like, "Oh, you got to put on you got to put on the D&D stream. They're going to be talking about the fighter. So if you can imagine, I'm driving, Bob is in the passenger seat, Steven's in the back. So he goes ahead and puts on the fighter, and their names are escaping me, but it's Jeremy Crawford and some other person who's filling in as sort of just this, I guess, interviewer, although really doesn't say anything or add anything. It's really just Jeremy Crawford speaking. And, you know, Jeremy Crawford, a very good game designer, is a little bit dry and not the most exciting thing. And so we're driving. He goes, you got to put it on. So I hook my phone up to the car's Bluetooth and we put on the thing. And this fighter stream starts. Now, I don't need to tell all of you, I'm not the most up to date with 5e stuff, but he had just been talking about it a bunch. So I was like, fine, whatever. Steve wants to listen to it, we'll listen to it. I'll talk. So I'm driving, and, you know, they say something about the fighter and some of the new changes. And I went, that's kind of interesting. Oh, that actually, I like that. Oh, that's kind of a neat change. And I'm kind of like throwing things out there. And we're getting towards the end, and they're going on about every single subclass. And I'm looking at Bob, and Bob and I are trying to have like this other conversation over the conversation. And finally, we look back, fucking Stephen Glicker has fallen asleep. Okay. He asked me to put on the thing. I listened to an hour of Fighter 5e updates, and he was asleep. He fell asleep. He couldn't even make it through it. So needless to say, I was like, well, shit. Okay. I'm up to date. And then of course, when I got there, a lot of people were talking about it. I mean, there's no way around it. 5e is still, 5e is still the big moneymaker, you know? And, I think a lot of people feel like, or at least I got the sense that a lot of people feel very committed to keeping on the 5e train. And I think it's kind of interesting because I made a poll for my patrons if they wanted me to talk about what I thought about the 5e, because again, I know there's some stuff happening this week, so it probably wouldn't have been the best thing anyways, because they're going to keep talking about more stuff. And I am like an outsider, you know, like in a weird way, right? Like this is like the one game that I don't know the most about. But I will say it's really funny because at the time we were there, thank you, Ken, Todd Kenrick, thank you. So while at the time we were there, you know, they talked about the fighter, they talked about the barbarian, they talked about some of the changes overall to the structure of the game. And they talked about the paladin. And it's funny because, again, I'm a complete outsider on this. Okay, I played. My history with 5e is that I played it 12 years ago during the playtest when it was called D&D Next, and I went to a couple local conventions. I went to Winter Fantasy, Gen Con, and I played in playtest groups, and I thought it was really interesting. And then the final product that came out was very different from what I had been playtesting at those times. And we played it for about 6 months, and you know, it wasn't anything new. It wasn't anything exciting for us. It wasn't anything that, you know, we had just come off of playing 4th edition. I could go into a whole thing about it, and if somebody wants me to, I will. But needless to say, I haven't really been touched the game much since then. I've played in one campaign. We went to 20th level, but there was a lot of house rules, and there was a lot of skipping. You know, like we were gaining like a level a session, you know, once we got past like 12 or 13. So it was kind of a different experience. Any case, but one thing that I thought was very strange was a lot of people seemed very upset about all of these supposed changes. And I thought, just again, from a complete outsider, I thought they sounded good. I was like, okay, yeah, this sounds more like what people have been complaining about and wanting out of the game. And it seems like they're giving that to people. And, but again, it's a whole separate conversation because there's a lot of nuance to what I think people are saying. And I think there's a reason for it, but anyways, we're not going to talk about the 5e any more than that. But needless to say, it was the talk, you know, there was a lot of talk about it. And I think by and large, my sense is from the convention, from speaking with some vendors, that a lot of people feel like that with the OGL debacle kind of in the past, the new one coming out, the continued focus on 5e, the release of it to the Creative Commons, they feel like the future of 5e is safe. And so they don't want to rock the boat. I mean, you know, when you look at the difference between number 1 and number 2, it is such a huge difference. And, it is really, truly a huge force. Well, hopefully, Mark, that was one good Stephen Glicker story. I've got a couple good Stephen Glicker stories. Yeah. Nakia is, yes, all is right with the world. Well, again, thank you for joining us. Voinupla, what's up? What's up? Yo, yo, yo. I thought Derek was about to sell us insurance. No, I am not. Erica, great to see you. Welcome. London, hello, hello. Yes. What's up? What's up, Sean? We hung out with Sean this weekend. We hung out with Erica this weekend. We hung out with Dr. Waits this weekend. It was pretty good. Moral of the story, the 5e fighter is so great, it'll put you right to sleep. Yeah, maybe. So, again, if you have questions or if you have things that you'd like to ask, go ahead and throw them in the chat. I'll probably answer them right away. We have 2 goals tonight, Super Chat and Tip, mostly just because we're coming back and I don't really remember where we were at with some things, but I know that there are 3 classes left to cover in our class history class series. We've got to do the Ranger, the Cleric, and the Wizard. And technically, we have one on hold for the Alchemist, which we're going to do when Pathfinder 2 Core 2 releases. So, anyways, if we get those, we'll do those. And then Thursday, we're going to start off our AD&D campaign series. We are going to be talking about the Birthright campaign series. Sean, question, what happened to the Daggerheart game? Crying emoji. Yeah, so my apologies to Jacob Wojo, who tried to bribe me into playing Daggerheart. We set up a Daggerheart game, but I had Bob and Smith sign up for it, Sean and Stephen Glicker. However, I could not figure out a time to schedule it. So, we had a bunch of games running and we had a bunch of people all running around doing various events. Smith kind of went off and do his own thing on Friday because his wife came into town. So that really, and most people, Bob and I left Sunday before noon. And so that really only left Thursday and Saturday. Sean, you weren't available, obviously, on Thursday. So that left just Saturday. And that was one of my busiest days. So it just worked out that we didn't get the chance to play the Daggerheart game. Although I printed out all the playtest material. One of my goals with this convention was to play Daggerheart and run it. And it did not happen. So sometimes the shit happens. You should. We did suggest some that was definitely spoken of by people. They said, "Oh, you should stream that car ride." It would not have been very exciting. So big buzz with PF2, the very short champion preview. Quick thoughts on a short preview. Well, I mean, again, I'm here to talk about Origins, but I also happily just hang out with you all. I mean, it's been a while, so it's nice to hang out. I liked it. I mean, everybody here knows I've had complaints about the certain aspects of the champion. And it really sounds like most of those complaints are, I mean, again, I don't say that it's happening because of me. I just think that they're smart people. And I like to think that I have a good insight into these things. So I think that some of the problems that I've seen over the course of the last, 3 or 4 years with Pathfinder 2, things like what they changed with Disarm and some of the other stuff, were very similar to changes that I had made because I thought that was a better option. So particularly for me, the one thing with the champion's reaction was the range, and it sounds like they are going to, now that they have sort of made it part of this aura system, the champion's aura. I fully expect to see something like what we saw with the kineticist, maybe a feat that allows the champion to extend the reach of that aura, and I think that alone is a really, really good improvement. And then the restructuring and reclassifying some of the feats, I think, is also needed. The champion feats were not only historically not really that good, they were also highly selective. You could only take this if you were good. You could only take this if you took this oath. You could only take this. And so by the time you got to a level, there might be 8 class feats, but only 2 of them are options for you because the other 6 require some previous choice that was like a do or die choice, or like what alignment you were, or what litany or whatever, what path you took. And so, yeah, I thought that it felt a little bit constraining in a game that is so much about, player choice and player building and stuff. So we drove in on Wednesday. We got checked in. Never again at the Red Roof Inn, Columbus Convention. Stayed there many, many times during my Magic the Gathering career. But it was very expensive, and the rooms were well air conditioned, but the building was not. They got rid of the continental breakfast during COVID due to health and safety concerns, but conveniently enough, did not bring it back afterwards. weird how that works. Now again, no, I've stayed this place many times, especially when in past Origins and especially for Magic the Gathering tournaments. It was affordable. It was close by. Again, nice little continental breakfast. Clean. It was fine. It was like none of those things this time. It was a mess, and it was very disappointing and very expensive. It was crazy. So I was just not happy with that. But, it was fine. A bunch of us stayed there. A bunch of me and Bob stayed there. We shared a room, and then Trevco from the Patreon was there. Boothby from the Patreon was there, so it was fine. So we got in Wednesday. We got all set up, and we started off Wednesday, which is unofficially the con. We started off with a game of A Quiet Year, and if you don't know A Quiet Year, I've talked about this on the stream before, but the Quiet Year is a map-making game where you take a deck of cards, and each card represents a week in the year. And the game setting is kind of vague and left sort of for you and your group to sort of suss out. There's no game master, but it's supposed to be sort of after a sort of a post-apocalyptic setting, where society has kind of collapsed or whatever. And you have 1 year to try to, in the life of this community, to try to see what they can build and what they care about and what will happen to them. But one thing that I have found is that this game, in theory, could be played very seriously. But whatever reason, I have found that when you play it with people who I'll just generally lump in as, Fantasy 20 aficionados, D&D, Pathfinder, it always gets pretty bizarre, and it always gets pretty funny, and it always gets really, really over the top. And so our game started off as this like quiet community. It was like they lived on the shores of there was like an ice, everything was frozen, except that they lived near these geothermal vents near an active volcano. And that's how they stayed alive. But they had these real significant problems. Like the geothermal activity had increased. Their river, which is their source of fresh water, was now boiling, which wasn't a problem, but it was killing all their fish that they had been using to survive. And inevitably, within the first couple of rounds, and the idea of this is you draw a card, you have a prompt, it asks you to think about the community, and again, as the player, you have almost complete autonomy to do whatever you want. And whatever you create, the idea is you add something to this map. You add a symbol, you draw the forest, you draw a little thing, but you're not supposed to write words, icons, symbols, but not words. John says, day 571 of asking for a guest show with Fabula Ultima's Manuel. We had a great experience, John. When I say great experience, I mean Tomas Harenstumpf, which we did the interview with from Free League, was really great. But Bob and I also, generally speaking, really enjoyed the process. And so I think that now that we've kind of got more of a idea of how we want to conduct these interviews, the length and the setup, and recording it ahead of time, I think is a really big relief for me, because then I don't have to juggle so many balls at one time. So maybe that is something that we think about and we do. So in any case, but thank you, John. So the game starts, and of course, immediately there's some dark forest, and the thing is well, what's the problem with the dark forest? And then somebody's like, oh, it's occupied with minotaurs. Okay, so we got minotaurs, and I will say, maybe a fun Stephen Glicker story is that it's interesting playing. We talk about on the show a lot about playing games where you play to win and games where you play to find out. And probably one of the best examples of this, in my personal opinion, is a game like Fate. And the reason I bring this up is, one of the things that really shows what kind of player people are. I have played Fate with players that were very firmly in the play to win format, mindset. There's nothing wrong with that, by the way. Traditional D&D, OSR D&D is play to win. New school D&D is arguably play to win. We could talk about that, but people with this D&D as a challenge, it's a puzzle. It's the combats are there to test your might, test your knowledge, test your skill, test your luck. It's a test. It's a challenge. And when I've played games like Fate with those players, and they have this idea where they can, compel against themselves. You know, John, at least you're very consistent with that. Thank you, John, for $10 just for mentioning fate. Fantastic, fantastic stuff. But I think it's the easiest litmus test, because I have played with people who I consider to be really good role players, and when they play Fate, the idea that you would somehow sabotage yourself, that you would compel against yourself, you would give yourself a penalty to turn a success into a failure just because it served the better story, even if the game does give you a narrative meta currency in the form of a fate point as an exchange. A lot of people really do struggle with that. It's not how they think of games. So in this game, it is completely play to find out, and the whole idea is that as a player, you almost have you're very neutral. You have a dispassionate interest. You're interested in the community, but you don't have a particular stand or moral upholding. You're very dispassionately attached. So you might on your turn, when you draw a card, you might choose to say that, oh no, the disaster has struck. The community's harvest of grain has been ruined by a plague of locusts, and now the community is starting to starve to death. Right? You want to introduce challenges and problems all at the same time, and you want to make it. And again, as a player, there's no GM. In fact, even when it's your turn, the other players aren't supposed to talk. You're not supposed to play by committee. On your turn, it's your turn. There is a separate action that you can take, which is, let's talk about this for a few seconds. But if you don't choose that action, and if you choose that action, you're giving up on taking a different action. The other players have to just quietly sit. So it was interesting because, Stephen would be one of the first people to tell you that he is a play to win player. And so when the Minotaurs were introduced, like the very first turn that Stephen had, he was like, oh, I make a discovery right outside of town, very convenient, and close by are a bunch of weapons in a cache, in a cache of weapons, and I go, oh, okay. And I was kind of serving, not as a GM, but sort of as a overseer, I was trying to just help them with the game rules and stuff like that. And I go, oh, okay. So there's a cache of weapons. What condition are they in? What's their, facilitator. Thank you, Matthew. Matthew, another patron that we had the pleasure of meeting at our KOLC meetup. Matt and his brother. That was pretty cool. I go, so Steven, okay, what kind of weapons and what kind of condition? And Steven goes, the Minotaur killing kind, big axes and whatever we need, big pole arms, and they're in great shape. And it was just like, okay, and again, you're not allowed to say yes or no. It is what it is, and it happens. And so another thing that you can do in a quiet year is, on your turn, you can start a project. So, again, you have complete autonomy, and you can be like, I think it's really important that we, build a wall around our community. I know that we have some lumber left over, and I think we should at least have some sort of fortification. So I'm gonna, you kind of draw on the map, like maybe a little jagged wooden fence in a brown marker, and you have there's a set of D6 that come with the dice, the game. Any D6 will work, and then you put down how many weeks you think that project would take, up to 6 weeks, because that's the highest the D6 goes. And if you think it would take more than 6 weeks, then that's fine. But then maybe it is several projects, and you have to do them in stages. So, Bob, there was an old dam that no one quite understood how to work, and they thought that maybe if they could operate the dam, they could fix the water problem, right? Because the water was running through the geothermal vents and becoming superheated and boiling, which was killing off all the fish. So Bob had this idea of like, let's go to that old abandoned dam and see if we can fix it. And I was like, Bob's like, 10 weeks. And I go, no, well, the highest you can go is 6, Bob. And Bob goes, okay, 6 weeks, right? So he put 6 weeks on, which means it's going to take 6 turns before this becomes option. Whenever Steven would start a new project, he would be like, I think it takes 1 week. He would just put 1. He would just be like, it takes 1 week. In fact, if I could pick 0, it would be 0. So again, and again, it's fun because there's no winning and there's no losing. But it is interesting when people are given that kind of power, how much they take it and how they can, it's difficult, I think, for some people to think in that way. In any case, things quickly spiraled out of control because when the group went to kill the Minotaur with their newly found weapons, kill them they did, but they also harvested the Minotaur meat because they needed food. And what they discovered is that the Minotaur meat was actually a powerful performance-enhancing drug. And the elders of the town that consumed it became extremely strong and possessed of great strength, and they themselves began to turn into Minotaurs. And then during the night one time, the village elders all left the town with the weapons and to go start a new Minotaur fortress. And the group was left dismayed, but they did find salvation in the Blood Horse. That's right, a new cult arose, the cult of the Blood Horse, which promised salvation. And of course, it is the opposite of the Minotaur, a horse. Also like a centaur? No. Body of a man, head of a horse. And they discovered a cache of magic, and then they tried to strap one of the townsfolk to it in order to imbue them with magical power. And then somebody drew a card that said, "A project fails spectacularly. What is it and what happens?" And they go, "Oh, the kid that we strapped down to that source of magic, yeah, he explodes, and the project is a complete failure." So there was some strange occurrences that occurred throughout the course of the game, and eventually the avatar of the Blood Horse itself manifested in the town. They had pretty much lost all of their undead pirates had destroyed their fortifications, destroyed their homes. They were pretty much left starving and alone as winter came. And we like to think that they did not make it. So that was our game of A Quiet Year. I got a couple people here that played in that game. Erica was in the game. Blood for the Blood Horse. She forgot all about the pirates. Yes, of course, the pirates came up. Undead pirates, by the way. It's a fun game. It's not like the deepest game in the world. But I like to play it at cons because it challenges different parts of people's brain. And it's an interesting game to play. When I played at cons, just as an advice for you all, the game has 52 cards in it. 52. It's made from a deck of cards, playing cards, 52 cards, because there's 52 weeks in a year, and it represents 1 year. I always remove a couple of cards from the spring, the summer, the fall, and the winter, because at a con, I really do. I want the game to take about 2 hours long. So I usually take out 5 or 6 cards from each season, just so that the game goes a little bit quicker. And that way, people don't get, too bored. I mean, if anything, you want them thirsty and be like, wow, I want more options. But you can really, sit down and dive into it. And yeah, Nakia, it's part of my con bug out bag, which is just like a duffel bag that I pretty much bring to all cons to just have ready to go. A Quiet Year is one of them. A Fiasco is another one. I always bring Fiasco and a big Ziploc bag of white and black dice, D6s. Because I like the old Fiasco. I don't own the new Fiasco, but I prefer the old one. So anyways, it's a really cool game, and it was fun to play with, Steven and a bunch of patrons. And it was interesting seeing people bounce all of these ideas off of each other, and maybe struggle with some of these ideas. And that's what makes the game fun. That's what makes the game enjoyable. So that was my Wednesday night before the con even started. And let me see what everybody's saying here. We had a super chat from Dr. Waits. Dr. Waits, thank you for the super chat. Had a power gaming player I convinced could play a badger and mouse guard. The GM didn't allow it, obviously. Why not? Oh, mouse guard. My brain, for some odd reason, was thinking root. And I was like, oh, of course you could play a badger in root. Oh. Yeah, no badgers in in Mouse Guard. The name of the game is Mouse Guard. It's like defeats the whole purpose. But yes, it is true. And look, there's a reason why power gamers enjoy these games, because so many RPGs are power fantasies. I mean, you start off as nothing and you gain power, and you make choices, and you learn how the game works and how the rules work, and you build your character, and you crush those challenges, and you embarrass those challenges, and you level up and you get stronger, right? That is something that, for many people, that is a innate desire in real life. But, very few of us are so successful as our D&D characters. So, it's a very powerful allure to be, strong and kick ass and do whatever you want and have the ability to reshape reality at will or whatever, crazy powers that your character has. So that's a very appealing thing. And I understand it. Sorry, you have used a modded version of a Quiet Year as a classroom icebreaker thing before. Yeah, that's pretty cool too. I love it. That's great. I think it's a good game for that, especially because it like avoids like the group think, and it avoids like other people talking over other people if you're really, really focused and making sure people don't violate that. Were any of the big three present at Origins? None. Paizo wasn't there. Modifius wasn't there. Nothing from MCDM. Nothing for Daggerheart. Nothing for DC20. Yeah, not in any sizable amount. I mean, there may have been like maybe one person or something was running a Daggerheart game, but it was kind of like it was just some independent person who wanted to run it, like if I had run it. Origins is kind of a weird place. I mean, it's a big con. I mean, it's arguably not quite a third of the size of Gen Con, but I just think those games are operating on such a different mindset and a different mode that Origins is sort of beneath their notice, if you would, but again, and it's not because, Origins has a lot of board gaming, but so does Gen Con. I think people think that Gen Con is this big RPG thing, and it's not. It is kind of, I mean, it started as like a, like an old school wargaming convention, right? Before D&D even existed, Gen Con existed as a wargaming convention. And while RPGs have always been a big part of Gen Con, now it's so much more than that. It's this like, it's like the, it's like the nerd press event of the year. And so I think a lot of people just say, no, I'm only going to go to Gen Con. Yeah, the only thing that I saw there was Gloomhaven RPG progress. And spoiler alert, I bought a Gloomhaven ticket to a Gloomhaven RPG event to playtest it. Spoiler alert, I took a nap and I slept through it. And I don't have anything to report. Oops. The only thing I got is that from people who did play it said it wasn't that good. But again, I haven't played it, so I'm not going to weigh in on any of this. They say that it's in development still, so who knows if things could change. But I slept through it. It happens. Listen, I'm not the young man I used to be. So in any case, so I didn't get a chance to play Gloomhaven, but it was there. So Thursday started. Rob Stopper, the game I was talking about was called A Quiet Year. It is by Avery Alder. A Quiet Year. When I went to Gen Con in 2021 or whatever, it was almost entirely board games. Hardly any TTRPG showing. Was very sad. Yeah, that is true. I'm okay with it because I love board games, and I enjoy those as well. I mean, I find it very interesting because, I mean, I get that, like, this is one of the reasons why I personally struggle, side tangent time, but what are we doing here if not side tangents? I struggle with RPGs at Gen Con. So let me tell you a little bit about my RPG experience traditionally at Gen Con. Traditionally experience. Traditionally, I would go to Gen Con, and I started going to Gen Con in 2002, which was the last year that they had it in Wisconsin. And then 2003, they started doing it in Indy, and I've been going there ever since. I've obviously missed a year during the pandemic. I missed a year when I was hiking the Appalachian Trail, and then I missed a year because last 2 years ago because I couldn't get a hotel. And I have a badge, and I'm probably going to miss this year because, again, I don't want to do all the work that is involved with it, and trying to figure out a place to stay and shuttle the back and forth. Any case, my Gen Con experience used to be I would go with my friends. There would be like 8 or 9 or 10 of us, and when we were young men in our early 20s, there'd be like 4 or 5 guys in one room, and there'd be like 2 rooms. And then as we got older and we had a little bit more money, we started, actually having everybody have a bed. And this is back when you could just get a hotel room whenever you wanted to. But we would all go down there. We'd roll down there. Basically, our entire RPG group would roll down there. And while I was there to basically play and demo new board games. And then my friends and I, who I came with, would get together and play basically the RPGs that we were playing at home. Like we would just take our home game, except we'd be playing it on a Thursday or we'd be playing it on a Friday. And so, part of the reason for that is because I have never been super into RPG one-shots. And the reason for that is because, and this is like going back in time to the earlier days, I feel like RPGs, I think that a lot of people go, oh, I played the RPG, I played the one shot, and it was okay, it's whatever. I think there's so much more to RPGs than just that you get out of them one shot experience. I think it's very hard to judge an RPG based off of one. I think so much of an RPG is about the longevity. It's about the story. It's about the character growth, the character progression. And so just playing the game and like experiencing the mechanics, I don't think gives you the proper grasp of what the game is about. Now, some of that changed circa 2012, 2011, 2010, maybe 2010, when I started going to Indie Games on Demand and I started getting introduced to these new crop of indie games, these, this Apocalypse World game and Dungeon World game. And while these games still had a lot of progression to them, they could more compactly have an experience in a shorter period of time. But then there was even games beyond that that I really disliked or really liked because they were designed literally for one shot. Things like One Shot World or whatever. Hey, Kyle.
Kyle tipped $20. Y'all have been a bright spot during some busy times the past few months. And I get to learn about new games or how to be a better player at the table too. Cheers and catch you on the VOD.
Well, thank you very much, Kyle. I'm glad that you've gotten so much value out of this. I'm glad that we've been a bright spot. We're happy to have you, and thank you so much for that support. Happy to help you in any way you can, and I'm glad you're enjoying the content. Thank you very much for that generous tip. That is very nice of you. Thank you. So, there were games that got created like World of Dungeons, Lasers and Feelings. Lady Blackbird is a great example. Lady Blackbird is designed to only be played in one shot. And so that is those games I think are great to play. But when you try to play like a traditional, Pathfinder type game, it's like I just don't get it. I don't think you get the experience as much. Matt, thank you. It was nice meeting you at the con. Derek, I got to go teach, but hope your con was good. Matt, I at this point, I assume you mean go teach an RPG, but maybe you mean something else. But I had the opportunity to hang out with Matt and his brother at our KOLC meetup for a short period of time. We had a night. Actually, I spent a good chunk of time talking to those guys. And Matt runs a bunch of games. He's a professional dungeon master, and it was pretty cool. Oh, actually, a music teacher tonight. Okay. Yeah, so he runs a bunch of games on the side, and my brain would explode if I ran that many games. But thank you, Matt. I appreciate it, and it was great meeting you. And I look forward to future talks with you, buddy. You know what I'm talking about. So yeah, I really like those kind of one-shot games because they're designed for that. But these your traditional D20 games, I don't think really do it for me because I just don't think you get the full experience, and I think you miss out on a lot of it. So traditionally, I've kind of like not really appreciated one-shots, and you must dislike the DCC funnels like I do. I hate funnels. I hate the DCC funnels. I hate funnels. I have zero interest in those whatsoever. I view them to be a waste of time. If you enjoy them, awesome, knock yourself out. But I do find them to be very boring. Let's see here. Yes, 11. 11 is the number of games that Matthew is running. All right, Boy Nupala. Well, we'll catch you on the VOD, buddy, and enjoy. I'm sorry your vacation ends tomorrow. Enjoy your last day. So Thursday, the con starts, and I hit the con hall with Bob, and very quickly we're going up and down the booths. Going up and down the aisles, lots of board games. Bob is particularly excited. He's got a couple of board game companies that he's been really enjoying. over the last couple of years, and he wanted to see if they had new stuff out, and they did. So we played some of the games, demoed some of the games, and had some fun times with that. I myself made my way over to the Chaosium booth because I knew I wanted to pick up
John B tipped $55. Just noticed the tip goals have been lagging. So here. You're gonna do both and you're gonna like it.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you, John. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Actually, that means a lot, John, because obviously we haven't been, you know this channel, John, you know this channel better than most. We basically live off of tips because we don't make any money with our views. And we took off for the last 2 weeks. So, also I was, buying dinner and drinks for patrons and stuff like that. So Origins was an expensive trip for sure. So I really, really, really appreciate that. And I'm assuming that you want $25 to go to the cleric. So I will note that as being done. So thank you, John. That is extremely, extremely generous of you, and I appreciate it. And we're gonna close the gap then. So again, we've got a couple of stream goals that we're gonna deal with. Again, we're doing Birthright this Thursday, and then we got some other stuff coming up as well. So it'll be good. What's a funnel? I think Ryan explained it, but a funnel is the idea is that you roll 3 or 4 or 5, basically 0th level characters that have very minimal chance of survival, like almost no equipment, no feats, no skills. It's basically just some stats. They have like 3 or 4 hit points, and you like play them kind of all at the same time. And then whichever one survives the first session, like levels up to level 1 and becomes your actual character. I just think they're stupid and pointless. It's dumb, silly fun. I mean, it can be fun. It can it's fun the same way that like playing Paranoia is fun. It's very similar to playing Paranoia, where you have all your backup clones, and it's just kind of like this. And I find it to be kind of dumb, silly, and it's fine, I guess, for like a one shot. But I just don't find it to be a particularly engaging gameplay. So Thursday, as I was saying, I went over to the Chaosium booth and I picked up this. This is the Pendragon 6th edition book. So real excited for this. This is my first copy. I mean, I own the starter set. We did a first look on it that turned into like me just playing Pendragon. But this is my first copy of Pendragon, and I'm excited. I'm excited to dig into it. I also bought the Grey Knight, still in the shrink wrap. This one I didn't get to crack open, but this is a campaign sort of adventure kind of supplement thing. But very excited to kind of get into that. So some fun reading to do. And then, so Thursday, believe it or not, that's all I bought. I knew I wasn't going to buy any board games this year. I've had a hard time playing the ones that I do have, especially the physical copies. So, I was really just kind of looking out for RPG stuff. And, the fact of the matter is I kind of own most of everything that I have. So, almost everything that I want. So it was more like, will something there, jump out and surprise me? Pendragon had just released. I knew I was going to Origins. I could have bought it online, but I just said, I'll wait. I'll pick it up at Origins. It'll be more fun that way. So that's the reason why I waited on that. So Thursday, was mostly just kind of like browsing the con hall, exploring space and doing some other stuff. And then a bunch of the Knights of Last Call patrons and led by Bob went to go try their luck at the True Dungeon experience, which is like a puzzle room set up like a dungeon. They did not succeed, unfortunately. And while they were off doing True Dungeon, I hung out with Smith. We talked about, because this is another thing I love about conventions. I love hanging out with patrons now, but my friend group and my players, and I just love sitting around someplace at a hotel lobby or hotel bar and maybe having a drink and just talking about RPGs. That's so fun to me. I enjoy it so much, just talking about this hobby, just like you and I are doing right now. And getting to do that in person with my friends and new and old is just such a treat. So I really enjoyed doing that. So then we split because Thursday, I knew I wanted to do something that wasn't quite a one shot. So my idea was I was going to run the module T1, the classic D&D module called the Village of Hamlet. And this was written by Gary Gygax as a precursor to the legendary T2, T3, T4, Temple of Elemental Evil. So the Village of Hamlet was this kind of nest, this village that was well described in this module, but the end of the module is famous for what is known as the Moat House and the Moat House Dungeons. This was like one of the classic D&D dungeon adventures of the early 80s. And I wanted to run it. And I knew roughly how long it was. So I was like, well, I'm going to run 2 sessions of this. I'm going to run one on Thursday. I'm going to run one on Saturday. And the challenge will be, can you guys play through and beat this dungeon module in, 2 nights? So Thursday night was our first night. And we had Smith, we had Bob, we had Steven Glicker. We had a bunch of patrons show up. It was awesome. We had 8 players total. And which was fine because I said that we could have, up to 8. I said up to 7, but I brought stuff just in case an 8th person came because I knew how I was going to be running the game. So as sort of a, kind of an homage and sort of, tapping into the zeitgeist, I said, okay, we're going to run this using Shadowdark. Now, I had never read Shadowdark. I didn't own Shadowdark. So I bought the Shadowdark PDF. I downloaded it, printed off a bunch of copies, quickly skimmed the rules. And I was like, look, I'm just going to be winging this, Derek Melinda style. It's a D20 game. I've been playing these for 30 years. But, I was like, I'm going to really, we're going to really roll with the punches on this one and change up a lot of stuff. Just to suit and to fit the con. Now, of course, what made this really funny is that KOLC Dion was at this convention, and KOLC Dion and Steven Glicker are buddies, and they kind of know each other. And Steven's like, oh, I'm gonna have to bring by KOLC, and I was like, oh, don't do that. Like, I don't want her to see what horrible thing I'm doing to her game and twisting and tearing it apart. And he's like, oh, she wouldn't care. And I was like, oh, well, that'd be cool if she didn't. So the first night we play, and the group goes into the ruins of the temple, or the ruins of the Moat House, and we're playing Shadowdark, but we changed a couple rules. Shadowdark is famous for its 1 hour real-time torches. So I said, well, I've got these 10-minute. I have a 10-minute egg timer, 10-minute hourglass. That's going to be your torch timer. It's going to be 10 minutes, and I put it out in the middle of the table, and I go, if that hourglass runs out, and I notice it has run out before you notice that it has run out, and you're about to light a new torch or cast a new light spell, it will automatically trigger a deadly random encounter. So I put it out there, and of course, sometimes the players, didn't pay attention, and I would notice it, and I would go, okay, rolling a deadly random encounter. But other times, Bob would be like, I'm casting light, and I'd look out, and there'd be a couple of grains left in the hourglass, and then, you flip it upside down and let it continue to spin. So that was fun, the kind of, again, something I would probably definitely do at a convention game. But that first, the other thing is that the way Shadowdark works is you need 10 experience points to get to level 2, you need 20 experience points to get to level 3, and the way you get experience points is only through treasure. And unlike old school D&D, which you get experience points for treasure, in old school D&D, if you found an 850 GP jeweled dagger, it was worth 850 XP divided amongst all the party members. So, if it was worth 800 gold, it would be worth 800 XP. You have 8 party members, everybody gets 100, and you need like 2,000 or 2,500 XP to level. So you need a lot. But the way Shadowdark works a little differently. You get experience points rated from 0 to 10. Based off just like how cool and how big the treasure is. So like a legendary treasure is worth 10 experience points, and like a great treasure is worth 5 experience points, and a solid treasure is worth like 1 or 2 experience points. So it's kind of relative in that way. But what it meant is, like, as the con game, I could just very quickly I could easily throw out there and be like, oh yeah, you guys find this awesome treasure, and it's worth 5 experience points, and everybody marks 5 experience points. So now they're halfway to level. And I really wanted them to be able to level up while we were playing because it's so quick and so fast. But, we did have some deaths that first session. We had we had one player who walked into, I think it was Trevor, Trevor's fighter went into this tower and rolled like a nat 1 on his, wisdom check to see what was hiding in there. And I knew there was a giant spider in there. So I was like, okay, well, the giant spider drops down on you, grabs you. The rest of the party members just see him walk into the tower. And then you see this massive spider drop out of the, into the frame, grab him, and then pull him back up. And it crit him, and he failed the fort save versus the poison. And I was like, yeah, you're dead. And of course, GM Scott here says, okay, so he's busy, right? So I run in and get the treasure while the spider's busy, wrapping up our friend and chewing him up. So that was one way of dying. GM Scott also lost a character that first session when a rodent of unusual size leapt forward. GM Scott had lost his weapon, I think, and was basically trying to punch the rat to death. And they both hit each other and they both killed each other at the same time. So it was fun. It was kind of rolling with the punches. And, he made a new character and they found him on the side of the road drunk. And this is where we started to kind of go off the rails a little bit. In this game, you get these luck points, which are basically hero points. You can use them to re-roll a die roll that you failed. So GM Scott joined the game and I said, okay, well, you can get luck points like normal, but I'm going to give you these extra special tokens, which are going to give you drunk luck points. And let's see here. And drunk luck points are the same as luck points. You can spend a drunk luck point to re-roll any D20 roll. But if you fail that re-roll, it counts as a critical failure. And so, it was so, the idea being that like, you're drunk and you're going for it. But if you fail, it's going to be really, really bad. And then GM Scott, in a very, very baller, player's move, failed a check they found a giant serpent, and it was coiled around this very valuable jeweled dagger that everybody knew would be enough experience points for them to level up. And GM Scott snuck in there amongst the nest and was trying to get out and rolled badly. And I was like, okay, you can, re-roll with one of your luck. And everyone was like, what are you doing? Because GM Scott was giving them one of his drunk luck points when he had normal luck points available, meaning he could have just spent them to get a re-roll without the problem. But he said, my character's drunk. I'll use the drunk luck points. And so the idea being that if he failed that, it would be a critical failure. And believe it or not, he made it out. And then the snake actually tried to bite somebody and tried to grab somebody. But the party had a lot of missile weapons, a lot of shooting weapons, and they were able to kill it before it could eat anybody or swallow anybody. Although some people got close. The giant frogs almost killed, I think, Boothby's character. I think the snake had partially eaten somebody. It did bite you, but you made your con save. Okay. It did bite you. Okay. So the first session was fun. A bunch of people leveled up to level 2. And, we had a good time with it. But the idea was that you were going to come back. Now, we knew not everybody could come back for the second session, but if you had your current character, you could play a new character. So that was Thursday. We played Shadowdark. And again, I was making stuff up left and right. Like in the game, you're only allowed to have like one luck point at a time. It's kind of like inspiration from 5e. Boothby, who was playing a chaotic cleric. So he was a chaotic priest, right? So he's kind of like an evil priest. They're in this temple of elemental evil, and they enter this old room that used to be like kind of like the sort of the throne room. And there's all these dark, evil tapestries on the wall written with unholy symbols and, profane passages written in the blood of the innocent. And Boothby goes, "Oh, sweet." He's like, can I take, I guess so. He's like, "Can I take one of these down? And I want to fashion it into a cape, like a cloak to put around myself." And the joke was earlier, Bob's character, a goblin, was wearing a rogue or goblin. No, he was a goblin priest too. We had a bunch of goblin priests, but he was sneaking, kind of walking over into the moat house, and he was crossing over the drawbridge, and they had the broken chains. And Bob, for whatever reason, was like, "Oh, sweet. I'm going to get one of those big chain links from the drawbridge, and I'm going to like put it on my character, like over my character's head." And I was like, all right. Make an intelligence check to craft chain armor, not chain mail, just chain armor. So he did, and it's like we described him lashing this gigantic big iron link chain just to his character's chest, and I'm like, gain permanent +1 to AC with this armor. So later, Boothby finds these dark tapestries, and he's like, I want to try to craft a cloak, and I was like, make an intelligence check, and he succeeded. So I was like, oh yeah, the dark blessings of the gods are upon you. And so I took this because I was using poker chips for luck points. So I just grabbed this massive stack of luck points, like 6 or 7, and I just gave it to him because I was like, that represents the divine favor of the dark gods being upon you because you have clothed yourself in their power. So already we had just completely, 96 the any sort of reasonableness of this system. And that was the end of the day, Thursday. So then Friday starts, and I actually should note, by the way, that actually I did meet KOLC earlier than that, because she was in the hall. She had like a booth set up, for like industry guests, and I saw that there wasn't anybody there. So I was there with Smith, and I walked over and I said, "Hey," and she had met Steven had introduced us earlier. And I was like, hey, it's me from earlier. Because she had stopped by when we were playing A Quiet Year. I forgot about that. Yeah. So on Wednesday night, she stopped by with to when Steven was originally coming to come play, and she like talked with us for a little bit. And it was kind of fun. And I told Steven's like, oh, Derek's gonna be playing Shadowdark, and she's like, oh, that's cool. And I was like, yeah, I don't really know the system, but we'll go for it. So Thursday, I went over to her and I said, hey, weird question for you. I'm running your game tonight. But I don't actually really know the rules, and I don't own the rule book. Do you know where I can buy your rule book in this building? And she went, oh, no, nowhere. She's like, yeah. She's like, we're between printings right now. The first printing completely sold out, which is a good problem to have. And she's like, I would totally give you this copy, which is in my bag, but I signed it to give to somebody else, so it's written out to somebody else. And I went, that's totally fine. I'll just completely wing it. So wing it I did, which is how we ended up with the session that we had. So the next day, which is Friday, I was supposed to go play a Gloomhaven game. Oops, missed it. So that was on me. That was supposed to take up a good chunk of my day. So I didn't really have that going on. So I actually spent the day kind of just like talking with Bob a bunch. We talked about Dragonbane. Friday, Smith's wife came into town, so didn't really see Smith. He kind of was like, hey guys, I'm just going to take the day off, and me and my wife are going to enjoy the city without the kids and, going to the town hall, whatever. And we were like, yeah, that makes total sense. And so, and the group, the patrons were going to go to Hofbrauhaus. There's a German restaurant here in Ohio. There's one in Cleveland. We went last year. Everybody had a good time. I wasn't going to go because I thought I was going to be pretty tired and whatever, but they were kind of like, you should come. So I ended up going with them to dinner. So it was kind of like a pretty relaxed day. I didn't really do too much. And then even the day, in terms of gaming, and then the day ended on Friday with us doing a Magic the Gathering draft. One of our patrons had brought up a bunch of extra packs. And so me, Bob, a couple of the other patrons, we got to get Steven Glicker, who was on, we did a 3-on-3 team draft. It was me, it was Steven Glicker, and it was Trevor's son, Noah. And the three of us were on a team versus Bob, Erica, and Trevor, and we crushed them. We got the W. So it was pretty cool. It was pretty fun. I had a fun time playing Magic there, kind of into the late night hours. But so it was pretty funny. But we ran into when I was with Steven, I did walk around the hall a little bit with Steven.
GM Scott zipped $25. This is a super chat disguised as a tip. I'd like a refresher on both class histories.
GM Scott. Thank you. You son of a bitch. Let me update it. It's disguised as a tip. All right. Let me move it over here. There we go. GM Scott, thank you for the $25. I appreciate it greatly, and thank you so much for your support. Thanks for hanging out with us, buddy. It was great. It's been great seeing you. GM Scott's like my new con buddy. I feel like I've seen him more than I've seen any other patron, between him stopping by and hooking us up and giving us stuff, and of course all the conventions. So it's been a lot of fun hanging out with Scott. He's a good guy, and the fact that he's close by, just up in Michigan, makes it a lot easier. So, it'd be one of these days, maybe Scott, we can figure out a way. I don't know, get some gaming together, or something like that outside of the conventions. But thank you, buddy. That was nice of you. So Friday was kind of a relaxed day, but I was with Steven and we were kind of hanging out. And, that's when I was kind of walking around the hall with Steven and, we were talking industry. We were talking, gossip, about stuff. Cause Steven knows everything and he knows everyone. And actually we stopped by a booth. So this is my second purchase. We stopped by a booth. This is a good Steven Glicker story. So we stopped by a booth and Steven's talking to the people there. He knows them really well. He's talked with them a bunch and maybe even, I don't know, maybe he did some consulting for them or something. I don't know. But this was a company called Mage Hand Press. And the guy who's behind Mage Hand Press was really, really, really cool and was really excited about his product. And he just talked up. Now, this is a 5e sort of variant. It's a sort of a 5e variant player's handbook. So in a sense, it's almost kind of like Pathfinder, as Pathfinder was for, it's kind of like Tales of the Valiant or anything of those other things for 5th edition. But I really like the art. I like the style of it. It definitely had kind of like a World of Warcraft, League of Legends vibe to it. And, we were talking about some of the classes and he was obviously very inspired by 4th edition D&D for certain aspects of it. And it was just one of those, impulse purchases. I very much doubt I will ever actually play the game, but it's one of those books that I really probably just bought just to read and to see what their design choices were. It's got 10 new classes, 152 new subclasses, a bunch of feats and spells. So I thought it would be worth, taking a look at it and just seeing creators be so passionate about their game. It just gets me excited. And so, plus we were hanging out with them for a little while and they were being really nice. So that was what I bought on Friday. But this is where it gets really good. This was maybe the highlight of the trip for me. So we go over to the Lithryon booth, Lithryon, the people who make Pirate Board. And normally I would not be interested in this at all. I don't like the board games. I don't like the artistic style of it or anything like that, which is fine. That's totally fine. But we are over at Night's Last Call in the middle of setting up another new mega game. We've had our Northern Reaches game running for the past 3 years, and season 3 is about to start. Hopefully soon, fingers crossed. It is about a month late, but we're going to be starting a new Dragonbane game that is going to be a big community game, and that game is going to be set naval on the ocean. It's going to be set amongst islands and pirates and that type of stuff. So I was like, well, let me see what they have. I'm trying to become inspired. Now, a lot of pirate stuff doesn't really work for me because Pirate Age of Sail stuff, is like too late technologically speaking for most quote unquote fantasy games. I'm talking about the big, huge, Men of War, the gigantic, huge, 3-masted, 5 decks of cannons and guns. All that stuff is way too much. But I was like, well, maybe I can get inspired by something. Maybe I can find something that'll give me some cool ideas for certain nautical themed rules and nautical themed rule sets. And so I go over there and sure enough, they had a nice little cheap product there at Limithron, and it's called the Limithron's Guide to Naval Combat. Just a small little pamphlet, and of course it is designed for 5e, so we're gonna have to maybe take some inspiration. But a quick look through and I talked with them. I was like, I think there's some cool stuff here that maybe I can beg, borrow, or steal from them. And also while there, I learned that their creator, the person who did this, was an artist and was kind of upset that there wasn't a lot of cool boats and ships and water stuff. And so they started drawing maps during the pandemic, and they also now sell those maps as part of their Patreon. And I was like, oh, I might have to just buy all of those from you because it'd be really cool to be able to have all those cool ship and beaches and, kind of nautical themed things to offer as a resource to our GMs. And no, the name of the Dragonbane game is not going to be called Southern Beaches. The name of the Dragonbane game is called Dragontide. And it is going to be set primarily on islands and water and naval stuff. So here's what's really cool about it. I'm over there looking at this book, and Steven Glicker is next to me. He's looking at one of their like little pamphlets, And you know, he's kind of trying to maybe get, you know, inspired, like, oh, maybe I could do a little thing. Maybe we could do this with some of our monsters. You know, just, you know, Steven's always, you know, he's always got his ear to the ground, and, you know, he's always trying to, you know, come up with an idea. And the guy at Limithron comes over and he goes, Derek Melinda, Knights of Last Call. Yeah. Oh, wow. That's great. Oh man, I love your channel. That's so cool, man. Like, great to see you here. Blah, blah, blah. And just nothing, just blank on Steven. And Steven's almost kind of like, hello. And the guy's like, yeah, I don't know at all. And he's just like, oh yeah, yeah. And then he like hits his buddy on the shoulder, and the other guy at the booth goes, oh hey, what's up, Knights of Last Call? And like both the guys are like super stoked. They don't recognize Steven at all. I could just feel him fuming with the shame. And he's like, and like later on, like we're talking and something like that, and the guy sees like he's got like a producer. He goes, yeah, I have a YouTube channel, and we make games and roll for combat. And the guy goes, oh yeah, no, I know you know, and the guy's like, yeah, roll for combat. He's like, yes, roll for combat, yeah, okay. So the guy did know him eventually, but he was very mad that I got recognized and he didn't. And he was very public. He was like very public about this. So as we're leaving the booth, he looks at me and he goes, it's because you were wearing your shirt. He goes, I need to start wearing a shirt. He's like, we have shirts, but I feel so stupid wearing my own company's shirt. He goes, but I'm gonna have to, because I don't want to not be recognized like you know, while with you. So it wasn't even that he didn't get recognized. It was that I got recognized and he didn't. And that was probably the highlight of my Origins trip, honestly. But it was fun, and I love hanging out with Steven. And you know, Steven and I, we went to lunch together a couple times. We got food over at Barley. We got food over at North Market. Steven and I hung out and went to a really nice steakhouse, which Smith very graciously picked up the check for everybody. Although I ordered a burger, Smith ordered the Wagyu filet. So there was a little bit of a price difference there, but still, it was very nice of him to pick that up. So just, you know, and Steven played in most of my games. He played the Magic Draft with me. He played in he played in my one Shadowdark game. So it was really fun, just getting to hang out with him. So Friday was kind of more of a loosey-goosey day, and I had fun sort of kind of roaming the hall and picking stuff up. But we did, while I was with Steven, we ran into KOLC again, or maybe KOLC was with Steven and they saw me and they stopped. And she was like, oh, you know, how'd it go? And Steven goes, oh, I was telling her about your game. And I was like, yeah, I used 10-minute timers instead of an hour. And I introduced this thing called drunk luck points. And I was having people make intelligence checks to make unholy cloaks from tapestries. And she was just like, yeah, that's awesome. That's great. You know, that's fantastic. And I was like, oh yeah, okay. You seem legitimately honest about this. And I got to say, it was kind of cool. It was kind of impressive. You know, I had heard good things about her, and you know, I'm here to say they're pretty much all true. Because she was very sweet, she was very nice, and she's just a total geek, and it shows. And I say that in a good way. So that was a lot of fun. So then Saturday came, which is essentially here. Space Narwhals, good to see you. Love Glicker, but that's my favorite part of your Origins trip too. So speaking of Space Narwhals, so it was either a Thursday or Friday, I had another cool little run-in. So we had a patron who unfortunately missed our meetup, but I did get a chance to run into him and his wife while I was out on the con hall, just randomly. They recognized me and they came over. So this is Dr. Waits, Space Narwhals, and I was like, I was a little bummed that they couldn't make the thing, but I think the reason they couldn't make our meetup was because they were busy beating the Golden Obelisk True Dungeon experience. So they saved the honor of the KOLC, which, you know, Bob and company had brought great shame to us by losing ignominiously. But Dr. Waits and Space Narwhals was able to bring back the honor. But one of the cool things I found out while planning for this trip is that one of my patrons, used to write for Necromancer Games, and I absolutely adored Necromancer Games. I suppose you could say I still do. So this was a 3rd edition company that was run by or headed by Bill Clark or Clark Peterson and Bill Webb, I should say. And I was calling Bill Clark, but Clark Peterson, Bill Webb. And this came out right, or I should say the Necromancer Games came right out when 3rd edition came out. And Necromancer Games' tagline was, come on, focus. Not going to focus. There it is. Their tagline was 3rd edition rules, 1st edition feel. So this was sort of classic, just classic dungeon adventures in the style of kind of an old school game. This is like 2001 when when 3rd edition came out. But anyways, but Dr. Waits wrote a book, and I did not own this one. I knew of its existence, but I never bought this one. I never had this one. So he had a copy, and he brought it, and he gave it to me, and that was awesome. I was like super stoked. So that was fun. I'm glad we got a chance to run into them because they were super busy with their trip, and they were playing lots of games. So that was fantastic. They say all fair and love war, but why are you at war with Steven? I'm not at war with Steven. On Tuesday last week, I picked Steven up from his hotel, or Wednesday, I picked Steven up from his hotel. I drove him to Origins the day before. I bought him a great seat for the Guardians game, bought him a hot dog, the whole thing. It was I love Steven. Steven just doesn't like it when I get recognized and he doesn't. Yeah, he needs that shirt. I work with Mark Seifter. Yes. No, I don't think he did. I think, Wizard of the Coast has kind of gone back underground in that way. So Friday was fun. And then Saturday was kind of the last day for me. I kind of hung out with Bob and Smith a little bit. Picked up all the free RPG Day stuff from the booth, which I need to go through, but they had some nice looking books there. I was with Steven, actually. He was like, Glicker, he was like, I can't believe the quality of some of these books. Like, this must have cost them a fortune, and that guy knows his prices. And some companies just really went all out. In particular, Brian, you would know which one this is. The one that's like the Dark Souls combat one. The game is escaping me. The Hollows is maybe what it's called. They had just an incredibly beautiful, Hollows. Okay. They had a great book. The Dragonbane book did not disappoint. It's basically a free version of the Kickstart with a better adventure. So just a fantastic adventure there. So a lot of cool stuff from the free RPG book. Yeah, exactly. It's literally everything that you need. Even the pre-gens. Let me tell you something. This is such a design. This is a level that I cannot tell you how much these small details matter. The Dragonbane book has pre-gens in the back, and the pages for the pre-gens are perforated. They're perforated, so that when you get that book, you can just easily just tear out your character sheet. That is so smart. See, look, Ryan said the same thing. That is so smart. And that is such a nice touch because, one of the things I talk about all the time is playability. These games, these books are made to be played. And I get that people make aesthetic choices and I get that those things can matter, but boy, you don't have to give up on playability and usability just to make better aesthetic choices. So just really impressive stuff coming out of those things and just really, really having fun with it. Dr. Waits in the house. We greatly enjoyed Steven's Shadowdark live play with KOLC when he romanced the dragon. Yeah, so I like to think that Steven is there's a reason that we get along so well. If you've watched any of our prior things, maybe pretend like the Poppet Christmas Carol, maybe when Smith's ice sorceress Elsa, the Ice Queen, seduced Frosty the Snowman. Steven got to play along with several other RPG luminaries in a special Shadowdark game that was like public, for an audience run by KOLC. And at one point they were fighting a dragon, or there was a dragon after them, and Steven used an item that turned him into I believe a black dragon. And they're like, okay, what are you going to do? You're going to fight it or whatever like that. And basically Steven was like, hey, and he's like, basically I'm going to go seduce the green dragon. And, I think they faded to black. I mean, obviously, rightfully so. But I think it was like for, I don't know how to say this, but it's like for an audience and a group, I think, if you watch Knights of the Last Call, if you've played a game of, PBTA or something like that kind of crazy off the wall experiences is probably not that uncommon. But I think to like a more traditional audience, it could be really, really, really like, wow, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen, because you're just used to just fighting everything until it's dead. Right. So just fantastic. What? An RPG intended to be played. I'm obviously not in the demographic. Yep, exactly. The first half is the quick start rules. The second half is adventure. Just beautiful layout and all this other stuff. Great Gold Worm, what's up? Hello, hello. So on Saturday, I picked up my last 2 purchases of the con, which was over at the Free League booth. I picked up the Monsters Standees set for all of the different monsters from the bestiary for the Dragonbane box set. And, oh, come on, what's going on? Why? There we go. And then I also picked up this beautiful Dragonbane GM screen. And the reason I did that is because I think I want to add Dragonbane to my con bug out bag. It's just such a quick and easy to use game. The core set is quick, packs up nicely. The pre-gens are really well made. Between the core pre-gens and the RPG Free Day pre-gens, I've got a nice little set. I've got the little pawns, pretty much everything I need to just quickly pull out a game and run it, and people can, instantly grok it and get into playing. Because, that's the other thing. I don't like games that are so complicated that I need to like explain, for an hour and a half how to play, generally speaking. So I wanted Free League to get some of my money. Free League got some of my money. So, the only other thing I purchased, that is it. That's all I purchased, if you can believe it. The only other thing I purchased was I did buy a copy of the Arkham book for Call of Cthulhu, but that was as a gift for our patron Boothby, because I told him Boothby ran a full Pathfinder 2E campaign weekly for the past 2 years on our Discord for our patrons. And I told him, and they just recently finished and the complete adventure, all 6 adventures or whatever. And I told him, I said, that's such an awesome accomplishment, and thank you so much for doing that. I said, while we're there at Origins, if there's any book that you want me to pick up, let me know. I'll buy it for you. And he wanted me to buy him the Dragonbane Bestiary, but they sold out. So instead it was the Arkham, which was, he's a Call of Cthulhu fan, so it wasn't like it was like a horrible decision. But anyways, happy to buy an awesome patron and good friend an RPG book. So that led us into Saturday night, where we returned to T1 and the Moat House, and that's where things got crazy. Now, unfortunately, some people couldn't join us. Erica had a flight to catch home. We didn't have room. Steven didn't sign up for it, and he was busy with something else anyways. So we had a couple new people come in, including GM Setso, who a patron of ours, who brought along his buddy Doug, who had never played an RPG before. Now, what transpired was a crazy game of D&D. And the best I can say is this. All right. So at the end of the first session, the group returned to the town of Hamlet, and Shadowdark has these carousal rooms, carousal tables, and you can spend a bunch of your money, and then you roll on a random table, and stuff happens to you, and you gain experience points. It's basically a way of converting your gold into experience points, but also getting some random stuff that happens to you. Now, during the course of the adventure, Trevor's 20-year-old son Noah, and yes, he's a 20-year-old, he's really hyper, he's very much Gen Z. He's kind of very, energetic, and he's 20 years old. they found this gold chain as part of their treasure. And he was like, and his character's a thief. And he was like, hell yeah. And he's like, I take the gold chain. I'm rocking my gold chain, right? And he was really happy. He was super pumped to have this gold chain. Well, at the end of the first session, when they went on carousing, everybody went carousing. His character got, according to the carousal table, like, duped by a kind of an evil priest. And I was like, oh, I know exactly what happens. She swindles you out of the gold chain. And he was like, no. He's like, okay, we got to get that back. We got to get that back. And so the rest of the groups were all like, kind of like swearing revenge against all these different NPCs that the carousal table had said, had sort of swindled them out of various goods and items. So when we get back and we're getting ready to play this new session, the second session, and some of the old favorites and characters are there. I go, like, immediately someone's like, no, wait, I want to go get my gold chain back. And someone's like, yeah, I'm going to go help him. And I was like, okay. I said, I have to go to the bathroom. And Smith's like, well, what about all these things that are happening? I go, Smith, you run it. All right. So I leave to go to the bathroom. And when I come back like 10 minutes later, I discover that Smith has created a new mechanic for Shadowdark called pushing. And basically pushing lets you re-roll, but if you fail, you die. So by the time I come back, at least one other character is dead. And then I sit there and watch as like 2 or 3 other characters die, trying to get back their stuff from the Thieves Guild and from the clerics who swindled them. And but very, very quickly, like half the table is making new characters, including Smith, and including Trevor, who, by the way, had already lost a character the first time, but he was the one that got eaten by a spider. So we're already off to, we had already killed more characters before the game session even officially began, using a mechanic that didn't even remotely exist. So long story short, the group had enough money. They went carousing again. And Noah, who was playing the thief, leveled up to 3. So he was level 3. I think he was the only character that was level 3. So Smith makes a new character. He rolls it entirely randomly out of the back of the book. And he ends up with a character that is a wizard, female wizard named Jasmine, who has like 5 decks or something like that, or 4 decks. So just like horrible dexterity. And he randomly rolls his spells, and they're horrible. So we're kind of playing. We're trying to figure out how this is working. And they fight these giant ticks. And at the end of the fight against these giant ticks, I basically describe how they find Smith's character laying in the grass. And then we were just like, oh, all right, yeah, her legs, don't work. That's why her dexterity is so low. She's got, maybe she's got leg braces, or maybe she's paralyzed, or maybe she's a paraplegic or something like that. But, something happened and she's now like laying here, and maybe she was on a caravan or a horse and it got scared and she got thrown off or whatever. So the thief, I don't remember how this happens. I think because they were sitting next to each other. The 20-year-old who's playing the thief goes, it's cool, I got you. And he's like, I throw her on my back. So very quickly, they sort of established this sort of like Bran Hodor relationship where like, but they're also like sort of like Master Blaster from Mad Max, because like, like they're like fighting back to back, and like Smith's like strapped to his back and he's like swinging his staff around trying to keep people. And then Smith's like, well, obviously if I cast protection from evil, then all evil creatures get disadvantaged to attack me. But like, does it extend to create, to surround all, me and the thief? And I was like, yeah, sure. Of course it does. So they go down, and we go down into the dungeons, and the true, nastiness starts. And characters are getting, there's a bunch of zombies, but they have a bunch of clerics that are able to turn undead. Boothby's character, the priest, is really powerful and it's just, blasting people away. But then they go and they fight some ghouls after finding a secret passageway deeper into the dungeons. And Smith's character dies. Well, he's dying. And it's late in the night, and he's like, Bob's character also gets killed. And it's later in the night, and Smith, like, I could tell Smith doesn't want to make a new character because it's like we only have like maybe 45 minutes left or 30 minutes left. And so Smith's looking at me, and I'm looking at him, and I'm like, he's like, can I bond with him? And I go, like, my spirit. I was like, oh no, it'll be like Professor X in the one movie where he gets killed, but he actually like sends his mind into somebody else to sort of like hide there. Or like, like what Spock did with Dr. McCoy at the end of Wrath of Khan. So as Smith's character is dying, he transfers his consciousness into the 20-year-old thief. And they basically become like this merged hybrid character for the rest of the adventure. And like when Smith leveled up, like Smith crossed out all his physical stats because they didn't matter anymore. And basically, like when Smith leveled up, the hit points got added to the thief, and like all the spells that Smith was casting would affect him. So they were basically like literally, if you know the Gestalt rules from 3rd edition D&D, right, where you could be 2 classes at once, except this was a literal Gestalt because it was a wizard in the mind sort of taken over. So it was very much like Bran, right, when he would warg into Hodor and sort of take him over. Yeah, this is all very much rules as written Shadowdark, by the way. 100% rules as written. So anyways, things got really quickly out of pocket, and everybody's getting kind of crazy. Bob died. He just grabbed a pre-gen really quickly. So I think we were up to like, absolutely double actions, Pyro. Absolutely double actions. They found a mace, which was just a +1 mace. But when Smith cast Detect Magic on it, he rolled a nat 20. And the game says when you make a magic check, if you roll a 20, to double the effect. And I go, well, what does double the effect mean when it's just Detect Magic? And I was like, okay, it's actually, you super empower it with magic. It's even more powerful. It's not just a mace +1. It's a +1 mace of disruption. Like, so when it hits an undead, it counts as a critical hit. And everyone's like, yeah, sweet. Yes, GM Scott sacrificed a hand to get that mace. He stuck his left hand into a hole in the wall to get it, and it got chopped off. And that was actually like a really cool moment, because GM Scott stuck his hand in, got it cut off, and then the young kid, the 20-year-old Noah, was like, "Oh, cool! Like, I want to go deal with that trap." And the way the trap is like, it was like a guillotine shot down over the hole and chopped off the hand. But some of the more advanced, some of the more old school players like GM Scott and Smith were like, "Oh, I'm going to get a spike out from can I get like a spike out from my backpack and sort of like jam it up into the crack and make it so that like, the blade would have to go through this iron piece of, metal in order to cut my hand off?" I was like, "Yeah, absolutely." And the kid was like, "Okay, I want to go over there and disarm it." And I was like, "No, it's disarmed." Like, he's like, "Oh, no roll?" And I go, no roll. Like, that was a really good idea. How is the metal spike is in there wedged up against the blade. It's not going to cut through the metal. And you can see kind of like his wheels turning, like, wow, that was kind of really interesting. And really, he was like that. You could see him being like, "Oh, that's kind of interesting. Like, I didn't expect that." Like another great example of that was from the first session. So this was on 2 nights prior. We were playing with Steven Glicker. He was at the first session, and the group killed the snake. And they were like, "Oh, that was, that was really cool. Like, that was a lot of fun." But they were kind of like, "Oh, but where's the treasure?" And like, I was like, they're like looking around. They're like, "No." I'm like, "Nope, you definitely do not see any treasure." And Steven, who's been playing since the 80s, goes, "We got the snake and look for treasure in it." And I go, "Yes, as you got the snake, all this gold and silver coin come flowing, the remains of all the creatures that it has eaten come flooding out," because back then, monsters just had treasure randomly stuck down their gullets. But you wouldn't find it. There was no check to make. You just had to kind of know about that. That was like part of the player's skill of the game. Anyways, long story short, they get to the final chamber against the evil dark god, or the evil dark master, Lareth the Beautiful. This beautiful, we also had great things between there. Trevor critically hit with a burning hand spell against the ghouls or against the zombies and wiped out a ton of them. It was really good stuff. So they're fighting Lareth the Beautiful. Lareth the Beautiful has a staff of striking, which would basically instantly kill anybody he hits. He goes to attack the hybrid wizard thief creature thing. I roll a nat 1 because I'm rolling with like double disadvantage, which also apparently we allowed to happen. And I basically described that they disarm him of the staff before he's even able to do it. The group just hits, uses all their luck points, and they managed to kill Lareth the Beautiful, like right as we got to about midnight, which is about when I wanted to end. So That second session, pretty bloody. Had maybe like, if you include the ones at the start of the session, maybe had like 6 or 7 character deaths. For people who are Northern Reaches fans, you'll really appreciate this story. So again, the joke became that Shadowdark has a really good crafting system, because it doesn't. We were just basically making stuff up as we would go along, and I'd be like, make an intelligence check. So Doug, who was the guy who'd never played before, by the way, he's seeing all this happen. He's playing a wizard, and his weapon, I think he rolls a nat 1 and his like dagger breaks or something. He doesn't have a weapon. And they're in this torture chamber, and I described there being skeletons hanging in, manacles and old chains. And I'm not even kidding you this. He goes, can I get one of the bones and maybe some of this chain and make some sort of like bone flail? And Bob and Smith and I just about damn lost it. This is he didn't even realize why it was funny. But of course, if you're a Northern Reaches Season 1 fan, you know all about bone flails. And I was like, oh, yes, you have unlocked the true power of the universe. And so like we made like this flail do like 2d12 damage or something like that. And it gave him like a +8 to hit. So he just had this massive bonus to hit. And so this new guy who'd never played before, when they were fighting Loreth the Beautiful, he had a really high armor class. He had +1 full plate armor. But he was just like crushing him with these massive hits from this huge flail, doing d12 damage. And this is a game where even the fighters only get d8 hit points per level. There are no like, oh yes, it was also auto trip on crit because they were using the old Pathfinder 2E rules. It was a legacy weapon. Clearly it was from an older adventure. And so obviously it crit. So yeah, so he crit he crit Loreth the Beautiful. He did double damage. It was like half of his hit points. He collapsed to the ground prone. So it was pretty, and you could see him being like, wow, this is crazy and awesome. I have no idea what's going on, but I'm having fun. And so, and that was the last thing that I basically did. That was Saturday night. Saturday, we also did a KOLC meetup, which I've referred to a few times. We got together at a bar, maybe like 12 or 14 of us. We talked, we shared stories, and we handed out our Origins 2024 shirts that I had printed up to the people who wanted them, who bought them. And it was just a celebration of the Knights, and it was awesome because I basically spent the entire time there playing games with patrons, because even Steven, he's a patron of the Knights of Last Call, and with my friends, and in some cases those two things are the same, friends and patrons, and that's great. I didn't like have any sort of like, oh wow, this is the new game that's gonna like change everything for me, and that's okay. Not every game, never, oh wow, this is a board game I need to go buy and I need to pick up everything. No, nothing like that. Again, I just picked up Pendragon and this random 5e book. But I still had a great time, and it was a lot of fun. So yeah, that was basically Origins 2024. We woke up Sunday, Bob and I, we went over to the hall. We just did one quick, last kind of hurrah while he and I continued to talk about Dragonbane. Because again, he and I are working to try to create this mega campaign. And, Smith is the architect behind Northern Reaches Season 1, Season 2, and Season 3. Smith's much better at this stuff than Bob and I are. So it takes Bob and I a lot more work to try to solve issues and come up with stuff than it does Smith, because he's just a genius when it comes to those things. But that was fun too, getting to chat with Bob and all that other stuff. But after nothing else, we said our goodbyes, and I got on the road, and I wanted to get home to see my pups and get home and hang out with my dogs and start the decompression process and get back to streaming and get back to all this. So it was a lot of fun. I will say, I did have one. Shadowdark was obviously kind of a funny, crazy, out of pocket experience, but I did have one sort of realization while I was playing it, which is, well, number one is, I like to think of myself as a traditionalist, and that I really like the OSR style, and I do. I own OSE, and I've played BXD&D more times than I can count. But I really struggle with the idea of playing that kind of game for a long time. I'm talking 20, 30, 40, 50 sessions. I just find that would be too much for me. And one of the realizations I've had is like in the last couple of years is that I'm kind of conflicted because there are games that I definitely want to buy into, and I want to get deep into the game, but it's almost like it's not because of the level progression, right? It's not because of the power ups. It's because there's like, wow, there's just so much that we need to do, right? I know that sounds like strange. Like, isn't that like every adventure? Like, I'm talking about like not like an adventure path where everything is kind of laid out before you, but where you're like, wow, I really would want my character to do this thing and this thing and this thing and this thing. And you're like, I don't have enough time to do that in a 10 or 20 session game. So it's like, so I want to play this potentially never ending game. But the problem is at the end of the day is that these games require, or most of them have this form of progression in them, leveling up, gaining feats or whatever. And that in some ways, it almost kind of poisons the experience because you're like, my character's leveling up and like, I didn't want to, or I didn't need to. And you might say, well, in older games, you leveled up so slowly. It was almost like you didn't level up at all. And I'd be like, in theory, you might say, so that's perfect, right, Derek? No, it's weird because when the game has levels, when the game has exciting feats to choose or whatever, then I want to interact with those mechanics. Putting mechanics in the game and then saying you don't get to interact with them is not something that I consider to be a winning point. So this is definitely like, I want to have my cake and eat it too. But it's just like, I when I think about these old school games, these very micro, I don't want to, micro light isn't the right term, but these sort of light rules engines, your Karn, your Knave, your Deathbringer, your Shadowdark. It's like, it's great. They are right. They're very simple. They're easy. They get out of your way. There's no laundry list of feats and all that other stuff, which is fine. But the games themselves are still gain experience points, gain a level, and there's still this sense of progression. But now you're not getting anything for it either. And so I just wonder, like, how long is that really going to be interesting? And especially when it's so easy to die and these games are, potentially very deadly. So you invest a ton of time to not gain very much progress at all. And then the progress you do get is very unsatisfactory. Karn doesn't have levels. It's more like DB. But see, Sean, DB, we asked the creator of Dragonbane this, and even he said he doesn't view Dragonbane as a game that you could play for a long time. Now, he's not saying it's like a 5-session, 10-session game, but because of the way that the skill system works and there's no scaling DCs, once you've played your character for, 30 or 40 sessions, you might have a bunch of stats, a bunch of skills that are all 15, 16, 17, 18. You have enough heroic abilities that you're basically able to sort of deal with almost everything. There's no CR system or anything. And even he said he doesn't think that the game really can, function beyond that point. Now, Ryan says, I'm perfectly fine playing a game for only 10 to 20. I think he means sessions. Unless you mean the levels he can define. But speaking in terms of sessions, I agree with everything that Ryan's saying, 10 to 20, 6 to 20. And there's been sort of this internal friction in our gaming group, our local, our home gaming group, because, Bob is so new to this and he wants to play as many RPGs as he can. So if it was up to Bob would literally jump into a game, barely know it, play it like 1 or 2 times, and then jump to the next game. And I view that as very horrible because I say, like, you didn't even get to experience the game. You didn't really actually get to play it. You played it for such a short period of time. And again, this is one of the reasons I don't like one-shots. So I think there is a minimum number of sessions that you have to play for a game to really get to enjoy it. I do think that number is probably somewhere around Ryan's, 6, maybe more like 6 to 8 sessions, so that you can really see how the game works and integrates. And this is true for player Powered by the Apocalypse games, and I don't think that. That being said, then I have players like Smith who really miss those sort of like long-lasting, multi-year games with just all this endless progression or all this endless stuff that happens to your character. And I think that that's great too. But the problem is, how do you keep that interesting? And how do you not let the continual progression of the game just sort of change everything that you want. I mean, this is a classic D&D problem where, you know, you try to make something interesting, and then by the party goes into a dungeon, they come out a couple levels later, a couple of sessions later, and now they're 3 or 4 levels higher, and suddenly all those old problems aren't even, they're trivial. They don't even matter. And so while I like the idea of playing a 10 to 20 session game that allows me to really get in there, maybe get out before I get bored and move on and try a new game, the problem is it gets back to that whole thing where I've said before, which is, but how do you have enough time to really explore that space, explore that concept? And I think that, and I agree with Dr. Waits, we've aged out of lengthy campaigns. We're not college kids anymore. And that is very true. And, you know, I think that's something that's a hard pill for me and Smith, particularly, for the two of us to swallow, because, you know, we grew up playing together. And when I was in college and out of college, and hell, when I got out of college, Smith had an apartment and I got an apartment in his apartment building. So literally we were in the same apartment building, and we would get together Wednesday night after work. We worked at the same place. We'd get together Wednesday night after work with some of our friends. We'd play D&D from, like, you know, 6 to 10 or something like that, 4 hours, just a quick, short little 4-hour session. Now we're lucky if we get a 4-hour session, by the way, once a week. Then Friday would be like 7 to midnight to 1 a.m. So like 6 hours, 7 hours. Saturday, we'd run that back. So in a week, we would sometimes get 15 hours of gameplay. Now, these days, we're lucky if our sessions go for 4 hours. And we're lucky if we can get 2 sessions a month. So that means that in 1 week, we used to do as much gaming as that I basically do with the same group now in 2 months. That really changes the math on things, you know? And it's something that you really have to kind of think about. And so I just, you know, playing the sort of old school game and sort of these con pickup games, it really just kind of made me think I don't really have an answer for this. It's like, you know, what do I really want to do next? Like what really brings me the most joy in role-playing games? And right now, I don't know that I have an answer. I will say that it's not 1-hour tactical combats. I'll tell you that right now. I mean, that changes. You know, I love 4th edition D&D, but it is these combats have got to go. They just take way too much time, and there's just so little juice in that squeeze, you know, in my particular opinion. Yeah, so that's like the Bob problem. Bob gets bored. He wants to try out other systems. I want to try out other systems too, but, you know, Dr. Waits, I'd rather just have a really good game and stick with it. Now, here's what's really interesting. While we were at Origins, Smith and I were talking, and basically Smith said something along the lines of that the Legend of Five Rings game that we had, he's like, was so good. He goes, I don't remember my character's name because I'm bad with the Japanese names. He goes, but I think about that campaign like at least a couple times a month. I'll just be like sitting up and start thinking about it. And it really, really got me thinking. And everybody, he's like, and Bob was so good, and our buddy Kaz was so good, and even our buddy George. You know, George likes to play kind of like chaotic, you know, random characters, or try to do something kind of funny or kind of trolly. But even he was like really dialed in and just doing a really great job and had a really interesting character. And so all these things were amazing. And he's like, yeah, and the progression system was so good because you could gain all this experience points and really expand your character, but it didn't feel like you were getting so strong that you were going to be able to go like super Muso mode and just wipe everybody out. That's not the way the game works. And there were so many things that I wanted my character to do, and it felt like those things were real, and the dangers and threats felt real. And it's like, so why did we end that campaign? And the answer is because it was too intense. It was too much. When you start caring too much about a game, it almost becomes not fun to play, you know, because it's Friday night. These guys have kids and jobs and wives and husbands, and you know, you get to your Friday night, you want to crack open a bottle of mead or a bottle of wine and, you know, just have fun, you know. But when you're sitting there going like, you know, just like, oh God, like, how do I do this without betraying everything that I believe in? But if I don't do it, I'm just as guilty as our enemies, and there's no right answer, and I'm stuck in this horrible dilemma, and I'm just so stressed out about it. And it's like really gripping gameplay, but it's also torturous, you know, in a way. So it's very, very strange, you know. I don't think, says John, I don't think you can have an endless game and a story-based game at the same time. That's probably true, which is probably why these old endless games were all out dungeon delving and emergent. We're all about dungeon delving and emergent storytelling. Dungeon delving is underrated because you can pick up and play whenever for as long as you want. Bring back dungeon delving, and to be there's a lot of truth to that. There absolutely is a lot of truth to that. And you know, we had fun playing Abomination Vaults because it was very simple. But to be fair, those are fairly what I would call basic games. You know, there's not a lot of depth to those kind of games. And you know, sometimes you want to have that depth. You want to explore that. You know, yeah, I want my main game. You know, that's definitely a Smith thing. You know, Smith wants us. You know, we even kind of commented like, oh, should we do 2 games every? You know, one is odd weeks, one is even weeks. And Smith was like, no, like I'd rather just pick the one game and really double down on it. You know. Same thing happened with one of my Burning Wheel groups. We needed a break and are doing Into the Dark. Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of palette cleansers and stuff like that. I will say, I think that there is something interesting in the way that Avatar is set up. Hey, it's our buddy Trevor.
Trevor tipped $5. Noah said that Saturday's game was the most fun he ever had in an RPG.
Yeah, I heard him saying that so Trevor is a patron of ours. He's the one who brought all the magic cards, and Trevor's son Noah was the crazy over the top thief that mentally merged with Smith Wizard, and they were basically playing as like a combined hybrid character. And he was like, he's like, oh my God. He goes, this was the greatest thing ever. He's like, I've never experienced anything like this. It was so, you know, he's like, it was so out of pocket. It was so, you know, I believe his words were, fuck it, we ball. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. I liked having, you know, his energy there, and, you know, he was pretty excited about it. Let's just say that. But thank you, Trevor. Thank you for everything that you brought. That was a lot of fun. And that Magic Draft was really great. It was really part of the most fun, some of the most fun I had at the con. So that was good. So yeah, I want RPGs to be fun. But I also want them to, yeah, exactly. That's exactly what he said. So yeah, I had some interesting, you know, experiences there, and it just kind of gets back to this whole situation where it's like, you know, what is it that I want out of a game? And I thought about a game that's also really been in the back of my mind for a long time, which is Avatar Legends. And of course that is the PBTA game, a game that I really like. And part of the reason for that is because I think that Magpie does a really great job with it. But there's something actually subtle about Avatar, which I really think has a lot of promise. And that is the idea that the Avatar Legends game itself is set up to be done in a series of seasons. And I believe the book says that a season is supposed to be somewhere from 6 to 10 or maybe 12 sessions long. And the idea is, like a TV show, that one session or that one season is going to show, you know, some character arcs, and it's going to have this sort of one main villain progression. And there's going to be this one main challenge that the group is sort of, you know, trying to overcome. And then when the season ends, you know, you get this really satisfying moment. And just like a TV show, the season ends and the next season doesn't begin. You know, you might have to wait a year. You know, you might have to wait 2 years if there was contract disputes. And when the second season comes back, sure, sometimes you might have the same character. Maybe a new character joins for the second season or the third season, right? Someone new joins the cast. Or maybe an existing character is substantially changed by the experiences that happened to them in the prior season. And in Part of the Apocalypse, you know, we would call this a playbook shift, right? And that's where your character almost essentially comes, it's weird. Your character comes back as the same person, but they're a different quote unquote character completely, right? With new abilities, new ability scores. I mean, mechanically, they are a different character. But in the fiction of the game, they're the same character, but they were just changed so much by what happened to them in season. And so it's a great way for like a player to actually kind of get to play a new character while not actually playing a new character. But what's really cool about that is you could play this Avatar season, and let's say you're playing weekly, and you could play it for like, 2-3 months and complete a season, and then that's it. Maybe you don't play for the rest of the year. And then next year, or maybe later that year, after 6 or 7 or 8 months, you come back and you pick up that game again, and you pick up the threads of those characters with a new arc and a new challenge. But each season is its own standalone. And I think that system or that style is very appealing to me right now. And the way that the seasons are even designed in Avatar, it's known. I mean, it's not known to within, exactly a session, but you go into that season knowing, okay, this season is going to be 8 to 12 episodes, right? It's not going to be 2 or 3, and it's not going to be 20 or 30. You know that it's going to be around 10 episodes, depending on what the studio ordered. And if we get to that point, if it's episode 10 and the story wraps up, then that's it. That's the season finale. That's the end of the episode. That's the end of the season, and we'll get back to that. So I think that is a really interesting way to think about being able to play in the same game world and with the same fictional points, but literally be able to come back and play a different character. And again, I don't know how familiar you all are with PBTA and its playbook rules, but like, it would be like the equivalent of like playing D&D. Hey, got anonymous.
Anonymous tipped $3. Also, you only won the draft because you stuck me with Bob. Just kidding, Bob. I loved playing with you.
Thank you. I'm assuming that was either Trevor or Erica, because they were the only people with Bob's teammates. Hey, you know what? Listen, there's no shame. Bob didn't win his matches. Erica didn't win her, and then Trevor went 3-0. So there's no shame there. You either did perfect and all you could do, or you did as well as your other teammates. So who went 0-3. So it's good stuff. So anyways, I really like, so that's where it kind of got me interested in this idea, because like I like the idea of continuing to play a character, but getting to sort of reset it and have a different experience. So like I said, in D&D terms, this would be like playing a character as a fighter for like levels 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5, or whatever, over like 10 or 15 sessions. And then at the end of the season, right, your character suffers a terrible curse, and their strength is drained away, and, they're left weakened. And then when we come back for season 2, you're still playing, Edgar, but now Edgar is a low strength, low con wizard, right? Because he took the curse, or oracle or witch or something, right? And you're restarting like at level 1. And the group again just plays through levels 1 through 5 again as part of the season. And you're still Edgar, and the arc of Edgar is still happening, but it's different. And you're playing a different character, or a different mechanical character with different ability scores. And that is just such a to the way most people think of trad RPGs. They think of like, no, my character is sacrosanct. Their ability scores are who they are. It doesn't even make sense. What do you mean that his strength and intelligence scores would all change? And it's like, yeah, mechanically, it doesn't really tie back to any sort of simulationism. But if you watch some of these shows, a lot of times characters can change considerably and substantially between seasons. And I think that that's really interesting. I think that's an interesting model that I haven't really explored yet. KOLC, Magpie, Avatar Legends is really the game that I think I've seen it the most with. But other Magpie games, yeah, Gonza says Root could do seasons 2, keeping the clearing, and Outgun is season based as well. And I agree with you. I have my Outgun book. I haven't taken a look through it yet, but I'm familiar with Broken Compass, which was like their prayer game, but now they can't publish it or something because of licensing issues or something. Exactly. But even though Broken Compass is definitely more my like genre and theme, but yeah, Root could do seasons as well. And I think that would be really interesting as well. Or even like, generational play, right? Like you could even think of this as a larger scale thing where it's like, you play Avatar and you play for a couple seasons, and then you stop and you go, okay, we're going to fast forward 20 years or 30 years to like the next Avatar. And obviously maybe your old characters are now like NPCs and important legends, but now you're a new group of young people who have to go out and try to bring balance to the world and balance to themselves. But we're playing in the campaign world that you helped shape, that you helped build. I think that's really, really, really compelling gameplay, you know? Yeah, I mean, Pendragon has an element of that for sure. You know, there's a big part of, you know, your dynasty and your legend and stuff like that. I don't know how much, like, I don't know how much that actually, I know you have these ongoing legacies. I don't know how far deep it goes down the rabbit hole. I wouldn't be surprised to find out that it goes pretty deep, and that, you know, after playing Pendragon for a while, you're playing like, you know, Edgar the Fifth of his name, right? Who is this, you know, your great grandfather was Edgar the Mighty. And, you know, you're just kind of continuing that, that sort of generational play. I'll tell you what's another interesting thing, which I think is really, really cool to do. Where did I have this? Where did I first see this? Ars Magica. Ars Magica had this really cool idea. Yeah, Corwin the Second. That's a deep cut. So Ars Magica had this really cool idea, right, where each player has a magi, a powerful wizard, I mean, like, you know, Gandalf level mage. But very rarely, if ever, do the mages all kind of like gather together and go on an adventure. In fact, most of the time, it's usually maybe one or two of the magi, because they work together, but they're not like BFFs. But each magi also has like personal close retainers. I can't remember the term that Ars Magica used, maybe companion or something like that, along with like flunkies, men-at-arms, and red shirts, basically. But what's really cool about that game is each player has to make a magi, but each player also has to make a companion, but not for your magi. You're playing the companion of another PC. So even though it's like you're their quote-unquote retainer, it's not controlled by you, it's controlled by another player. And that way you can play them at the same time. So what I was going with this is, I think it's what's really cool and really interesting when you talk about like generational play. I'll continue to use Avatar as an example of this. So maybe in the first season, you know, your character is this like airbender, and, you know, they establish, you know, ignoring any canon or something like that. But, you know, your airbender establishes this, you know, airbending school that's designed to sort of like, you know, really focus on airbending as like a weapon and kind of move away from its pacifistic roots, and, you know, kind of elements of Zahir. And, you know, and the whole thing is like, can your character find, you know, peace with that? And then maybe the season ends and you guys do a generational jump, and it's 20 years later, and a new character makes a playbook, or makes a character who is like the Razor. The Razor's playbook is like, you were born to be a weapon, and now you've broken free from that. And it's a different player at the table who really thought your story and your school and this idea of airbending as a weapon was really neat. And now in this next campaign, it's not you, it's another player at the table who goes, yeah, I want to play that. I want to keep that story going. And like, maybe your old character is still the master of that, and my character was trained as a weapon and grew up as a weapon and grew to hate what she had become, and is trying to break from that, or is trying to maybe destroy what you built. But now the story goes on, but it's with a different character, and a different player. So I think that's like really cool. I think it's really cool and compelling gameplay. And I think you can see the same thing with like Pendragon, where like, I don't even know where my Pendragon book went. I think you can see the same thing with Pendragon, where like, maybe, you know, you play your knight, and then the group moves on to the next generation, and, you know, your son or your daughter isn't played by you, it's played by somebody else at the table. I think there's a really interesting element to that in some ways. I don't know. Something I had that was kind of like what I thought about while I was that. I thought about that, and I thought about how to make Dragonbane into a mega campaign for our Discord. Those are like the two things I was mostly thinking about at Origins. So, yeah. Sorry, I missed a bunch of chats there as I was going through here. So do you want games more like Pathfinder 2 or less like Pathfinder 2? It's a tough question. It really is. Because I'll be honest with you. The problem is that, look at 5th edition. 5th edition D&D is introducing these weapon mastery traits to their weapons, right? And Pathfinder 2, in a sense, has already done this, right? Like, you know, these traits tell you what these weapons can and cannot do. You know, well, can I use my whatever weapon to knock somebody over? And you're like, no. Why? Well, it doesn't have that trait. And you're like, yeah, but it's a pole arm, right? Like, I get that the top of it is an axe, but like, can't I like push somebody with it or jab them with the butt of it and knock them over? And of course you could say, yes, of course you could. Any GM could do that. But then if you're going to do that, why do you have the weapon traits at all? If they don't mean anything, then why are we writing them down and why are we pretending like they matter? So then you say, okay, so don't have any weapon traits, don't have any feats, don't have any skills, just do whatever you want. Make shit up and have the GM just make decisions. You could do that. You could totally do that. That's the way that a lot of these old school games work. But the problem is, you know, games and character progression is important. And being able to like mechanically make choices, you know, for your character that matter in the context of the game, those are important too. And so when you have a game that just doesn't have anything, and it's just freedom and you can just make up whatever you want, this is maybe a personal opinion. I know Smith feels this way. In a weird way, it feels like less of a victory. Now, I'm not trying to say that because a lot of times these old school games are set up as play to win, right? The game is trying to kill you. The dungeon is trying to kill you. You know, you need to be smart. You need to be clever. You need to beat it. So the mindset there is play to win, right? Game as a challenge, game as a puzzle to be solved. But when you can just sort of make up anything you want and the GM can say, oh yeah, that's cool, that's great, and it works and everything, you know, you beat it and it's great. In my opinion, and this is just for me personally, I'm not saying this is true for everybody, it feels like less of a victory. It kind of feels like, you know, when you're playing some game with a kid, you know, and the kid wins because the adult let him win. That's how I personally feel. I feel like it's not that I won, it's that you let me win. And that and especially when I'm playing like a play to win game, I feel like that takes something away from it a little bit. So I don't know that that's a good answer, Cal, but that is what I have. Let's see. John has two things here. From a game design perspective, skill-based progression is superior to level-based progression when you are trying for a long-term games. The reason is that you can better manage power creep while still providing satisfying dopamine hits of character progression. Yes, I mean, I fully agree that level-based games are inherently going to have those problems, you know? And I do think that I personally have become a bigger fan of skill-based progression and more horizontal progression than vertical progression. You know, Legend of the Five Rings doesn't really have levels. Dragonbane doesn't have levels, and those games have mechanically very much appealed to me, and I've been finding myself enjoying those. Nakia, thank you for the $5 super chat. Coming in hot today, buddy. Do you think the issue is trying to tie the RP and the G together, and the perfect game theoretically would nail that balance? Well, clearly Nakia is a big fan of the show, because that is exactly what the issue is. The issue is that I don't want it to be role playing, and I don't want it to be game. I want it to be a role playing game. I want the mechanics and the fiction to nail that perfect balance, and I want the mechanics of the game to support the fiction, and I want the fiction to support the mechanics of the game. That is what I want, and it's a role playing game, so I do want people to have creative freedom to explore the space, but I also don't want it to feel like it's just, you know, GM fiat, GM gimme time, whatever they say goes, because that doesn't feel like I'm winning either. And I'll be honest with you, the worst for me recently, well, Derek, I argue that there is no such thing as an impartial referee. I mean, that's been argued for a long time on the Discord, long before you joined. But I think that all GMs have biases. In fact, I even said in my one GM skills thing, I think it's good that you have a bias. Your bias is what makes you unique, and it's what flavors your game. You know, the idea that you have this like completely dispassionate, arbiter, I am the judge. It just doesn't exist. And I don't even know that that's what we should be aiming for, you know? Yeah, and Gonza kind of highlights it here, right? They're the judge and the jury, And that's kind of part of the problem. But yeah, but Nakia hit it right. I mean, yes, ideally you would have a game that would blend, you know, the RP and the game elements sort of into one cohesive goal. But, you know, some people argue that those two things may be diametrically opposed. And what I was going to say is that I think some of the worst examples of this are some of these more modern games. Because games like 5th edition D&D and Pathfinder 2nd edition are designed. I mean, if you look at the mechanics and you look at how the class features are presented to you, it is very much a game that is designed to be viewed as play to win, right? The game, the challenges, these things are trying to kill you. They're trying to defeat you. And, you know, the game has mechanics for running out of hit points and becoming dead. And, you know, there's nothing you can do about it. You're just dead unless you play well and roll well and make good character building decisions and good party tactics decisions, right? So it has all the elements. I mean, when we talk about challenge-based games, play-to-win games, you know, we're thinking of sports. That's what it really is. The problem with these modern games is, and D&D has always been essentially a sport in that sense, right? There's the rules, right? And then there's the players, and they're trying to beat the other team, whether that's the dungeon, the big bad evil guy, or whatever. And, you know, it's kind of no holds barred. There's not like a lot of protective things, and it's, you know, it's kill or be killed. It's a zero-sum game. The problem is that these modern games are technically play to win. But they understand that when you play to win, that means you can also lose. And when you lose, that creates tremendous problems with so many different things. It creates problems with players' expectations about their character, their investment in their character. It creates problems with just making a new character, fitting them into an existing campaign. It creates problems with derailing or you know, derailing an adventure path or derailing an adventure or, you know, creating mechanical issues that make something too easy or too hard because someone isn't the right level or whatever. So all those things and more mean that these games are still play to win. They're still sports, but they are loaded games, right? It's a sports game where the other team has been paid to take a dive, you know, and they're told, just make it look convincing, right? Make it look realistic. Okay. But if you do think you're about to score, maybe you trip on the 10-yard line and you fall short, you know? Or, you know, if you guys accidentally are up a goal and you see that the person's clearly kicking right, maybe you misjudge it and you dive left for the save. Oops. Oh, yeah, that could happen to anybody. So these games are very like subtle in the way that they present this, or in some cases not so subtle. And I find it very strange because now it's like, okay, if I'm going to play a sport, I want to play a sport. I don't want to play a sport where, you know, the other team is, again, being paid to throw the game. Because then it's like, well, then what's the point? Why should I practice? Why should I work out? Why should I try to get good at this game if it's designed for me to be able to beat it? And that's also part of the reason why I don't like so many modern video games. Because in a way, they are designed to be beaten, you know? I've heard that said before. It's like people, you know, I remember my buddy was living with me for a while during the pandemic, and he was playing one of the Gods of War game. And I remember reading like there was a new Gods of War game. I'm not big in the video game space. It might've been God of War, but basically people were like, I love the God of War series and I love the story. I wish they would put in an option to like skip the boss fights. Like when you get to the boss fight, you can just push a button and it would skip the boss fight. So you get back to the story, because I don't want to be good at the game, you know, and I feel like I pay just as much money as anybody else, and I want to see the story, and I don't want to have to like get good in order to beat the game. I'm just here to experience the story. Now, to me, that's craziness, but I mean, there's a lot of people that feel that way. And that's why, you know, arguably you could say that D&D and Pathfinder or whatever are designed now the way that they are. We had a super chat coming in from Cal. Sorry, I was on a rant there, buddy. I think something with Pathfinder 2 levels of granularity, but with diegetic progression similar to Wild Sea is my goal. I could see that. I actually think that could be really cool. I mean, there's a lot to like there. There's a balance, like you say, between the level of granularity, but also with the diegetic progression. That's kind of honestly what I'm trying to do with this Dragon Tide, Dragonbane mega game, is to kind of try to do both. So we'll see. We'll let you know how it goes. But I do think that'd be really, really interesting. But hard to do because you have to balance it and you have to make it so that the diegetic progression doesn't make the level-based progression feel worthless, but you also don't want the level-based progression to make the diegetic progression feel like it doesn't even matter. So, yeah. I hate when I feel like the GM is going easy on the group, protecting us from consequences. Yeah, exactly. And I also agree with GM Scott. Hard-fought wins feel the best. Playing EQ now doesn't feel as interesting as it used to. Soling up to 30 was not a challenge. I remember just getting to level 20 was a big event. And GM Scott, I 100% agree. We recently just played EverQuest, and we're probably going to play another time or two because we did want to get to level 30. But, we leveled in one abbreviated session what used to take me weeks to do and involved grinding and dying. But we did it in one night, and we didn't even die once because of the buffs and all the easiness that the game gives you now. And you're like, oh, so it's the game's a joke. Yeah, but you know what? If it was really, really, really freaking hard like it used to be, I probably just wouldn't play it. I don't have the time. I don't have the energy. I don't have the motivation. So it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't. To me. Let's see here. Piro says, I think there has to be a gate that separates level editor mode and play mode to taste. The gate can be either in and out of session or in and out of combat or before and after rolling the dice. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a line there. And I mean, I think good GMs do that. I mean, it's not black and white. I think there's a levels of gradient. But I don't know. I don't know that I'm in a world because there's a lot of times when I'm playing D&D and I go, I'm playing this RPG. I say D&D, but I just mean RPG. And I go, I want this to be interesting and exciting and fun. And I want it to be, I want players to have to make tough choices. And I want to see what choices they make and what are they willing to sacrifice and what are they willing to give up and what are they willing to, I'm not really interested in did they choose the right feat or not? Not anymore anyways. But it's interesting because, in a theoretical world, I'd be laying out these challenges before them and then they would have to go and defeat them and beat them, which is fine. But then I also don't want to be just a passive observer while they do that. But then if I get involved, I feel like I'm invalidating their victory. So I am torn on that. Right. The bias is the GM's special sauce. And that's one of the reasons why I enjoy playing Forge in the Dark games, because the way that you run the game is sort of your unique imprint on the game. An unbiased referee is called a robot. Yeah, that's true. Play to awesome. Yeah. In the third, yo ass goes down. Say it again. In the third, my ass goes down. I love that movie.
Silverwolf,
hey,
$25.
Silverwolf, thank you.
Thanks, Derek, for all your hard work. You've helped create such a great community along with the members. Ben is a fucking rock star.
Yes, Ben is a fucking rock star. I love Ben, and he hopped into the Discord the other day to give us an update on his blog and some of the games that he's been running, and I certainly appreciate, because he's still a member of the Patreon, but he took a break from the Discord because Ben was our number one contributor, and I did math once, and I was like, that guy spends a lot of time on the Discord. So a lot of people benefited from him, but I'm sure it took up a lot of his time, that he'd rather maybe spend in other pursuits. So we've missed having him around, but his impact is legendary. So yeah, Ben is a rock star. But thank you, Silverwolf, for your $25 tip, because that is fantastic. And in fact, actually, Silverwolf, as if to point that out, our schedules didn't work out. We tried to hook up while we were there, but at Origins we had one of our former patrons, Stephen Palmer, reached out to me and said, hey, I'm going to Origins this year. I'm going to be meeting up with Kenny, Mark, and Andy. And Kenny is still a member of our Patreon, but the other three gentlemen were early patrons. And they're, hero level, like great stuff. And we even hung out with them at the first Origins we went to as Knights of Last Call. Played games with them and stuff. And, things change. People move on, get interested in different games. Financial situations change. They left the Patreon, no hard feeling. But they all stayed friends. And they met at the Patreon. And then, they've kept it going. So now they're flying out to see each other and hang out at cons together. And they continue to play. And that, I couldn't even be more happier about that, I'd much rather have that happening than people joining my Patreon, paying me money, and not meeting anybody and not playing with anybody and not building connections. I'd rather you build connections, meet a bunch of great people, and then leave. If I had to choose between the two of them, I mean, obviously it'd be cool if you stayed too, but I'd rather you make those connections. So thank you, Silverwolf. That's fantastic. Combat Sudoku is rarely satisfying to me unless it's dialed up to 11. Yeah. You'll never see D&D at a casino. I'll tell you that much. Yeah, that's true. So like that's the thing, I also agree. Trying to always let the players win convincingly is exhausting. And I think that also comes back to it too. It's like at a certain point, as a GM, I don't know that I want to feel like my job is to constantly, test the party and challenge the party, right? And make them have to struggle while making it seem like that they are having to struggle. But I also know that I play with players who, if I go, hey, just to let you guys know, like, we're going to do these combats, but they're not actually going to be a struggle or a challenge, then the players are going to go, well, then why are we bothering to do them? And I don't really have a great answer. I don't have a great answer for them for that purpose. Let's see here. There are techniques in game design that allow fun in PvP games to be non-zero sum. Oh, okay. There's a GDC talk from Ben Brode about it somewhere. I'll check that out. I'll write that down. I'd love to watch that talk. I think that'd be an interesting topic of conversation. See, I'm always learning too. Ben Brode. Okay. I'll check it out, Piro. You have described the problem I have been running into with what I've been working on, but the playtests have been going well. Well, I think that some of these problems are universal. And I'm interested to see what you come up with. Also, I have no time to play MMOs. Yes, I mean, going to Epic Quest to get back your corpse while playing it, having to level up an alt just to get your corpse back before the timer ran out. Like, those are awesome, but it is just not, we just do not have the time. To be clear, I don't think oracles resolve you of GM bias. Because the oracle can guide the GM bias, and it can certainly whatever. But I could completely agree with you. They do require a lot of interpretation. Technically when Ben left the Discord, you lose your level, but yes, I don't think that London is his level that he was when he left. So I will say that London is higher than me. So I used to be number 2 behind Ben. Ben left. I was number 1 for like a hot minute. And then London, passed me up. Oh, it still shows him as 85. Okay, sweet. Well, then I spoke out of turn. All right. Ben is still number 1, the GOAT. Conventions are very weird for me. They always have been because, I'm a very introspective guy. I think too much about most things. And I really think too much about role-playing games. And whenever I'm there, it's almost like there's this energy being surrounded by all these people playing games and role-playing games. And it just makes me get really I really think about the hobby a lot whenever I'm at conventions. I went to Gen Con last year and I went by myself, and there were a couple patrons there that, we hung out and we got to meet up. Scott was there. Boothby was there. Ryan was there. And we played, a couple games together, but not too much. For the most part, I was by myself. I hung out with Steven Glicker a little bit, but I was mostly by myself. And I was just sort of absorbing all of the energy, positive, negative. And it always kind of makes me come away and just have a lot of thinking to do, So Piro says, even if you know you're going to win, you play to find out how you win, what you give up to win, or what you gain. And Piro, I completely agree with you. That's one of the reasons why I love playing a game like Fabula Ultima or a PBTA game. Because in Fabula Ultima, you know you can't die. You have to choose to die. So what's the point of the playing? Well, because you're playing to find out how you win, or if you win, what will you give up to win, and what will you gain or lose if you don't. And at the same time, your character story is guaranteed to progress if you want to keep going. The problem is a lot of traditional RPGs, you play to find out how you win. Well, how you win is the enemy's got to 0 hit points. What you have to give up to win? Nothing. Because if you had to give up something to win, it would fuck up the balance of the rest of the system, and you wouldn't be able to complete the rest of the encounters. And what you gain is level appropriate experience and level appropriate treasure, because otherwise that's going to fuck up the game. And that's why I have a problem with sort of neo-trad, whatever they're calling it, modern trad. I don't even know what they call it these days, but the big games, because they have designed themselves into a corner, is my personal opinion, in pursuit of an experience that I think is fundamentally flawed. Right. It's not what you fight, it's why you fight. Those are interesting decisions. I just find that they're kind of pointless and hard, to make in a game where there are no real consequences and the points don't matter. Yeah, they've become hamster wheels. Now, this is what I'm getting back to, though. Remember what I was talking about the God of War game and the people online that were kind of complaining, these boss fights are too hard. I wish there was a thing I could press to just auto beat them, have the AI take over, and beat the boss, and I can just watch it happen, and then we can get back to the cool cutscenes and the cool stuff. There is some perhaps large group of people who really enjoy those hamster wheels, right? They like going through the motion, A modern video game without the boss fights is what I call a movie, That's what watching Let's Plays are for. Yeah, Let's Plays are weird, though, because it's like, is this really happening, or is this still being made up? I don't understand it fully. Oh, I can't find it. I was going to, Hardrick, I was going to pull out my X-Crawl. Game. I have it on my shelf here somewhere. But yeah, very, very interesting stuff. Yeah, X-Crawl is kind of a fun game for sure. Let's see. Do they have like a new version of that game at all? I don't think so. I know that the person I think works for Goodman Games or something. Looks like they re-released it like 2020. I must have missed it because it was like COVID or something. Anyways, it was an interesting idea for sure. So Origins, had me thinking about my own game and how I interact with other players, and and how a lot of times, we've talked on this channel before about fun and interesting. A lot of times the games that I play where I have the most fun, I also tell them, and I go, that was amazing. That was so much fun. Everybody was having a blast. And I was like, I never want to play that again because it's not interesting to me. And then I'll make a game or I'll find a game that's really interesting. And I'll go, oh my God, this game is so interesting. It is not fun at all. And yeah, I think my continual pursuit is to find a game. And again, there is degrees of subjectivity to it. Now I know what people are saying. Fun. Remember, in my definitions, fun and interesting are fairly objective. Being entertained is subjective. So what I'm trying to say is, I think that a game can be designed for fun. Now, whether you will find that fun entertaining or not is subjective. That's up to you. And I always use the example here of Mario Party. Mario Party is clearly a game designed for fun. I do not find Mario Party entertaining. I will admit that it is fun, but I do not find it entertaining. So there's sort of like this ultimate outcome that is resultant from between the fun and interesting. And a lot of times I think with the TTRPGs, I'm looking for a game that is a balance of fun and interesting, which usually implies a certain level of complexity as well, that for me maximizes that entertainment quotient, that entertainment value. What game that is, I don't know. Because I play games and I really see elements that I really like. that I'm really having fun with, or that I really enjoy. I'm really interested in them, and then it's tough sometimes to understand that there's a temptation there, to want to just cobble together 5 different games and stick them all together and see what happens. My general sense of that is those things don't usually work out as well as you want them to. Some people have been very successful with $1 million Kickstarters by doing just that. But by and large, I find those games to be sort of, wonky. Legend of the Five Rings, obviously. Well, Legend of the Five Rings has that third problem, which is, wow, this game is very interesting and it's a lot of fun to play in, but my God, is it stressful? I don't even know if that's I don't even know how to express that in these axes, and I think that it's like it's a temptation that can ruin you because it can keep you from playing good games, I'm torn because on one side, I don't want to breeze through a video game, but I also don't want to, I don't feel like my time is well spent by memorizing boss problems and getting good. Right. And so it's a weird thing to say, like, I want the challenge to be this difficult. It's a very weird setting, like, it's interesting. Almost 2 million by going to a 5-action economy. Who knew? All right. So a couple of things to close us off on. So the first is, and I'm serious about this. I told him, I said, dude, you got to do this. You got to do this. So while we were at Origins, Emmanuel Galetto, who made Fabula Ultima, released official third-party licensing stuff. Now, I haven't looked through the exact language that he used, but it seems like, you can have, there's a powered by FU, powered by Fabula Ultima, part of the license. There's a license to use it. It says, you can create your own atlases and classes and monsters, the whole thing, or whatever. And I told, I'm me, but I told, I don't have any skills or abilities, but I told Steven Glicker, I said, dude, you have to. We were at the Studio 2 booth, and I saw Fabula Ultima. I said, Steven, you need to create a PBFU bestiary. You need to create a Fabula Ultima bestiary. It's the one thing that, like, everybody wants behind. And Steven was talking about how, like, nobody does bestiaries because it's so expensive because of all the art. And, like, it's a lot easier to do other things because bestiaries, usually require a piece of art for everything. And obviously, Roll for Combat and Battlezoo has sort of kind of cornered the market on sort of, weird bestiaries and additional monsters. But I also know that Mark Seifter is a fan of Fabula Ultima. And he talked about an Arcane Mark. I think he was running a campaign. I don't know if he still is. So he's obviously got experience and likes the system. And I was like, dude, you should make a bestiary. I was like, I know Emmanuel has talked about it, but I still think that he's like a year or 2 years away from even going down it. So I was like, you should totally do that. So I was like, really like, yeah, you should do that. That'd be really, really cool. That'd be fun. So that was one thing. Okay. Second thing. It started as a joke. And I don't know who's going to do it, but so it started as a joke, but I was talking about this long time ago. I talked about the action economy when people were talking about Pathfinder 2. And I made the joke about it's something, there's a scene there's something about Mary where the main character, Ben Stiller, is riding in this car, gets picked up as a hitchhiker. He's a hitchhiker. And the guy driving the car is kind of this unstable person. And he goes, you ever heard of 7-minute abs? That infomercial where they say you can get great abs in just 7 minutes. He goes, well, I've got the idea that'll kick that thing's 6-minute abs. That's right. One whole less minute. You get the same amount of workout in just 6 minutes. I'm going to make $millions. No one will ever stop that. And then Ben Stiller's character is like, oh no, that's great. I mean, but what would you do if someone made 5-minute abs? And the guy looks at him like he's an idiot. He goes, 5 minutes? You can't get a good exercise in 5 minutes. That's just crazy talk. That's just complete crazy talk. So I always joke that when, like, people are talking about the action economy, that makes me think of that in reverse, where it's like, you think 2 actions are cool? Well, here's 3 actions. Oh, you think 3 actions is cool? Here's 4 actions. So we were kind of joking around at at the con about, we're going to create a new game. It's going to be called, it's going to be called DC 21, and we'll have 5 actions. And I was like, no, you know what we should do? I was like, and like Stephen Glicker was kind of like joking with me about this. And I go, dude, no. I go, because he was talking about like starting having a game where you just start higher level, like where like the first session or 2 sessions or 3 sessions is just you leveling up your character. And I was like, he was talking about starting at level 20. And I said, no, have a game that is D20 based, but your game is called DC 21, and you start at level 21. And I go, the tagline could be DC 21. A level above. And and I was like it's just, as a joke, obviously, but like the idea being that like you're like, oh, in our game you start a level above, you start 1 level above where every other game stops. Other games stop at 20, our game starts at 21, and so it's clearly a superior game. I just thought that was funny, so funny. 5 action economy. Do I hear 6 action? 6 action. I mean, yeah, eventually we're going to, and it's funny. Smith and I we were joking about that too. And we were like, eventually you just end up with Hackmaster. Like if you keep adding the actions economy, you eventually just end up with Hackmaster, right? Where basically everybody goes at the same time and everybody goes every round. Basically, it's like, anyways, we were having fun and joking around and having stuff like that. But I mean, God, what was that at? Sheesh, what's it at? Let me take a look here. I mean, he must have tapped into something over there. DC 20 sitting at $1.7 million with 6 days to go. And usually you get a little bit of a surge there at the end, late backing. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if this got 2 million. So he's doing something. It's funny too, actually looking at this Kickstarter page, right? That the core art, let's see if I can pull it up real quick. Right? This core art, doesn't that core art, like, it looks like it's like the same. I mean, isn't the similarity there between like that art? Am I wrong? Like, am I just crazy? Looks so similar. But maybe that's the key. Maybe that's how you tap into the 5e market, is you use art and font like that, Yeah, very similar design almost. DC 20 is not a mystery to me. Good marketing, and it genuinely... I know nothing about the game, except that it has 4 stats instead of 6. Literally all I know. Oh, and apparently has 4 actions. DC 20 is not a mystery to me. Good marketing. That does help. And it genuinely speaks to perceived weaknesses of 5e. Yeah. I mean, that seems like that is a good recipe for making $1 million. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was just surprised at the support. I mean, let's take a look here. DC. What's it called? It's called the Dungeon Coach YouTube. He has 60,000 subs. That's crazy. I mean, by point of comparison, we have like, 12 or 13. So he's like 5 times as big as us. Like, he's not like some 200,000, 300,000, like some crazy number. He has 60,000. Like, Nonat has like 50. So he has 63,000 subs. He has 16,000 backers. That is a crazy ratio. So, I mean, he definitely did something right, because my God, that's crazy. Again, I am surprised, but I'm always surprised when these things do so well. So I don't know. I just see random things on Kickstarter sometimes where it's like, it just sounds like the most random, it just sounds like the most random game. And it's like, the most random RPG of all time. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, that has how much money, how much money is pledged to it? Like, it's just crazy. It's so crazy. Sorted by most funded. Yeah. Like, let me just see here. I don't know. Just randomly, like, okay, we got Advanced Player's Guide 2 and Bestiary 2. Do they not show the dollar amounts anymore here? Interesting. They don't show you the dollar amounts. It's like $134,000 for Savage Worlds Pathfinder. Jesus, I would never have guessed that ever. What else we got? Here we go. Castles and Crusades Reforged. All right, Castles and Crusades. It's sitting at $110,000 with 800 backers. That just seems crazy. I mean, put that into comparison. That's Castles and Crusades. That's been around for a long time, and it's got 15,250 less backers than DC 20. I don't understand this business, and I don't think I ever will. So, long story. No, yeah, I mean, look, you get, if you want to, I mean, KOLC will tell you the same thing. She put out a marketing campaign and kind of struck at the right time, and people were very dissatisfied with, D&D, OGL, and it did well as a result. I mean, that's the way business works for sure. KOLC Finder when? Never. You know how hard? No. Do you know how hard? I can't write an article without stopping and rewriting it 10 times. The idea that I would ever create a game is so laughable. It's actually ridiculous. I don't know anything about game design. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know much about his. I don't know. Again, I don't know much about the system. I might check it out. I mean, look, $2 million. Got to be something there, right? To check out. Yeah, KOLC Kickstarter will not go burr. We don't get 2,000 views on a video. We're definitely not going burr. But I mean, Piro, that's how you get your message out there. That's how you find your audience. I mean, that's just smart. That part, I'm not like mad about that. That's just being smart. Let's see what Derek says. Derek says, Tales of the Valiant, more of the same. MCDM, Tactical Extreme. Dungeon Heart, narrative mess. DC 20, what if we improve the worst parts of 5e designed by a math teacher? Well, there you go. We got it gone. We got it. Yeah, no night finder. Although I did joke. What did I wanted to call it? I can't remember what it's called. Wayseeker or something is what we're going to call it instead of Pathfinder. Wayseeker. Yeah. Oh yeah. DC 20 blew 13th Age completely out of the water. 13th Age was barely a register, barely a blip. Night Finder 3rd edition. Right. We skip 1st and 2nd. We go straight to 3rd. No, we got to call 5th edition so that people get it confused. Start at level 21. Right. And by the way, our game would still totally, it would go to like level 40 or something, or level 50. And we would still totally have all the stuff from levels 1 through 20. But when you make your character, it's like full on path builder, right? Like you literally have to build your character all the way to 21. And it's like a fully complex, completely ridiculous character. Like you start at like maximum complexity. This game is not for noobs. Go play some of your standard D20 games. Go start at level 1. We started at level 3 in my 5e campaign. When you're ready to start at level 21, you come play some Night Finder. I know nothing about. I don't really like Me, Myself, and Die. I think the whole him playing with himself is as weird as it sounds. Doesn't that it? And I don't know. I don't find I know a lot of people really like him. I do not. I mean, I think he's fine. I think he's a great content creator, whatever. And obviously, I know people who I respect their opinions do really like him and they like his style. I do not. Right. We have an yes. If you find a D20 campaign game with more actions, we will beat it by 10%. I will. Part of my pledge is that if another game comes out with more actions, like you bought this game, you invested in this game because you wanted the most actions. But what if another game comes out with more actions? I promise you that within 3 months of another game releasing where you get more actions, we will release rules errata that will guarantee that you are still getting the most actions for your buck. You start at level 5 on Fabula Ultima. That's another thing I think I've determined after this week, MGM Scott. I never really knew where I was fully on it, but I have come to the conclusion, and this is I've come to the conclusion that I think rolling to see if your spell works or not sucks. I just don't like those systems, and Shadowdark uses that system. We even used that system when we ran our DTX 5e game. We had to roll to see if your spell went off. I don't like it. Maybe I'm just but like if spells are going to be that kind of resource, then I don't think that it should be something that you are rolling on. I don't know. And I get that like it's exciting to roll, but it's not something I like the resource game too much, I think, more than I like the excitement of the die roll, Yeah, I mean, Javier, I'm sure there's good ideas in there. I mean, this person, if I have a critique, and I haven't read the game, so I can't say anything. It's that I think that the experiences of the dungeon coach are pretty, set it in limited in their 5th edition influence and maybe some video game influence, and a lot of times it's kind of like, well, that there's advantages to being aware. There's also advantages to not being aware, I suppose, of what else is out there. I just wonder how much of the game design space is going to feel like, yeah, that's already been done before. Like you're not really doing anything new. I mean, obviously, if all you know is 5e, then it may seem like a godsend, and obviously that has an appeal to people. $2 million. I think it's going to be great. Powered by the Cockopolis. The Go Forth edition. There we go. I like it. Anyways, all right. Well, it's good to be back. We're gonna be back Thursday talking about Birthright. That's right. The AD&D 2nd edition campaign series kicks off with the game where you start as a king or a queen or a high priestess or the grand archmage. So maybe we have to take some notes. This is a campaign setting that I never played and I only have passing familiarity with. So I'm going to spend the next couple of days studying up and learning what I can and sharing it with you and giving some of our thoughts, and we can have some conversations about old, weird AD&D 2nd edition campaign settings, because arguably some people say it killed D&D. So because they made so many of these campaign settings that it fragmented the player base and, broke the game. I mean, Aaron, that is the saddest truth, right? Which is, everything that Aaron's saying there, whereas meanwhile, there'll be, someone who's been in the industry for like 40 years or 30 years will put something on Kickstarter, and you're lucky if they get $100,000, or $50,000. And like, this is somebody who knows RPGs like the back of their hand. They've been designing forever. They know the ins and outs. And not only that, it's not just sizzle. Like, they know what works, they know what doesn't work. And it's like, oh, yeah, they did 120,000. Great. And then, I say this as an influencer, I guess is the term, even though I hate that term. I say this as a content creator of YouTube. Just because I have a channel does not mean I know what I'm fucking talking about. Okay. And that goes double for anybody else. If if your investment, if my experience and my education and my time with this hobby is valuable to you, then that is excellent. But do not confuse someone's view count or subscriber account with how good or, whatever their knowledge is. There might be somebody out there like one of those legendary game designers that I was talking about. They may have a YouTube channel and they might only have 1,000 subs. They might have 900 subs. They're not even monetized. I have 12 times that many. Am I 12 times as smart and 12 times as good at game design as that person? No, I'm not a fraction of what they are. So don't confuse, influence with ability, because those are different things. How else can I judge but on views? I mean, they don't, the algorithm shows you the views. The algorithm's going to show you the influencers. So that is true. Yeah, it's harder. You have to put in a lot of work and figure it out. It's tough. Yes, Birthright. And then if this stream isn't a complete disaster, which it might be, we might do some other ones too. Because like I said, there's like 17 AD&D second edition campaigns that they made. So I bought Bob the World Builder's Shadowdark Dungeon book because it's Bob. So I'm guilty of this. Yep. I mean, we all are. We all are. And I do agree. Sometimes, and that's why I said it can be good to know. Sometimes, but there are advantages to being outside of the thing. Although I typically find that the usual problem with people come in with less experience is that you're right. They do try to tread new ground, but they end up falling for the same pitfalls, which wiser, more experienced designers know because they've been down that road before. And you end up getting games that sometimes are very exciting, but usually end up feeling fundamentally flawed. And there's a lot of systemic problems that don't become apparent until you really start playing the game more. Well, yeah. I mean, that again, I think there's nothing wrong with D&D. I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of excited. I mean, the 2024, am I going to start a 5e campaign? Probably not, but the changes that they talked about for the 2024 Player's Handbook sound exciting to me. And I know there's a lot of people out there that are just raging about it. Like, what do you mean? My barbarian won't be able to smite because smite's a smell now. And I'm like, that sounds reasonable to me and good. And they're like, oh, it's going to be so lame when your paladin smite gets counterspelled. I'm like, are you fighting a lot of creatures that have counterspell? That seems kind of crazy. Also, if the smite is a divine power, then doesn't it make sense that magic would be able to counter it? Seems to make sense to me. They're like, well, now you can't smite with every attack that you make and all of your attacks of opportunity. And I'm like, good. Smite should feel special and meaningful and not just damage spam. I don't know. I'm just specifically picking on the paladin. And these are all complaints that I've seen. And I'm like, I don't know. They sound good to me. So. GM Scott, truth, in Matt Mercer, we trust. Okay. For both hair advice and how to run a game company. MCDM, Matt Colville did the same thing. The Spice Girls sold as many or more records than the Beatles. And I like the Spice Girls, and I don't like the Beatles. But I'll agree with you. Charisma is the most important stat, and yet it's a dumb stat, Forgotten Realms is my true love. That's tough to say what my true love is. I mean, Forgotten Realms is probably my true love. I mean, if we're being honest, it's probably the game it's probably the campaign world I know the most. But maybe we'll get to Forgotten Realms. But I really do love Eberron, even though that's a 3rd edition one. But it's in our list anyways because it's not just AD&D. It's like all D&D campaign settings. Howdy, hello, Beowulf. Hopefully you got much sleep. We're trying to wrap up here, but everyone keeps making really good points. Yeah, I mean, there's a fine line. I mean, it's weird, right? Rules matter, and then when you ignore them, it sort of makes future reliance on those rules. Like, let me give you an example. Let's say there's a situation, there's a rule, a player, right? You're playing D&D, and a player wants to run to this cliff face, jump off the cliff face, and land and attack the giant, right? That's down in the ravine, right? And like per the rules of the game, like whether you're playing 5th edition or maybe you're playing Pathfinder Second Edition or something, you can't do that. Like the charge has to be uninterrupted, and there's a jump action. Maybe there's a feat that lets you do that, but there's a rule that clearly says you can't do that for whatever reason. And the GM says, "No, that's cool. I'm going to let you do that." And you're like, "Okay, cool. That's awesome. Like that's fun. It's cinematic. Jumping through the air." And then later on, another player tries to do something, which is also not in the rules. And the GM, for whatever reason, feels like that isn't as cool, or maybe they don't think it's as cool, or they don't think it's as plausible. And they go, "No, the rules say you can't do that." And do you understand how that can create like a really bad experience for someone? Because it feels like, so they got to break the rules and I didn't, but why? Like, what was the difference? Like, what am I missing? Like, how do I, so the point of playing this game is to just convince you to break the rules. So that's where it can be really, really problematic. So I don't mind when people ignore the rules, but it can create these kind of potentially problematic situations. I have not read anything for Mothership at all. Horror is not my thing, but maybe it's worth like taking a look. I'll take a look at this. Ugh, the Realms. Listen, the Realms are cool. Ed Greenwood is cool. Maybe the current crop of 5th edition for the last 10 years has soured them for you, but trust me, the Realms is cool. Kryn's okay, but Kryn is fairly black and white, right? You know, with good and evil, which is, you know, which fits the world, right? It was their attempt to sort of create a Middle Earth high fantasy equivalent. But I do love Kryn. Yeah, Keith Baker's great. I love Keith Baker. By the power of the Knights of Last Call. Yeah, so Eberron's really interesting. I like the style and the genre, and obviously it's kind of wonky. The thing is like I think a lot of D&D leans well into Eberron because Eberron's kind of that big pulpy faction to it. Mystara is great too. Grand Duchy of Karamekios. Very cool. All right, everybody. Well, we are going to wrap up, and we'll see you Thursday. For all of our knights who are members of the Patreon, I look forward to chatting with you. I know I've been off line for like the last week because I've been out conning it up. So it'll be good to kind of get in there with everybody and find out what's going on already. Had some really nice conversations, and it's good to be back. Look forward to seeing you all on Thursday. We've hit both of our tip goals tonight, so very, 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 very much thank you. I want to really quickly shout out Silverwolf, Cal, Nakia, Trevor, GM Scott, John B, Matthew, Kyle, Dr. Waits, John B, another 2 times, for all of your incredible super chats and tips. I really, really appreciate it. Again, our channel literally only exists because of the support of our patrons and people who come in here and support us this way, because we don't really get a lot of views. So, you know, when I get that YouTube check for $100 a month, you know, doesn't really even cover the Adobe subscriptions. But thanks to your support and everything like that, I'm able to give some money to Bob and Smith, and I say, hey, go crazy, go wild at Origins. Trips on the channel, and they do. And so that's a great feeling, and it's fun to be able to do that for my friends and be able to get T-shirts made and give them away to people who are supporting us, all this other stuff. So it's amazing, it's awesome, and I look forward to seeing you next time on Knights of Last Call. Peace. Good night. Love you.